Walt Disney, the man of 1,000 stories. I'm sure you've heard your share of things about this cartoon mogul, from him being a closeted Nazi to a currently frozen head in a tank of liquid nitrogen right now. For just one person, he certainly made a mark on the world. Let's talk about Disney. Hi, I'm Tristan Johnson and this is Step Back History. Be sure to click the subscribe button as well as smash the bell notification to never miss a new Step Back video or live stream. Remember a few videos back when I said this? Man, that would not fly in the modern MCU, but it would better symbolize Disney's founder. A video for a different time. Well, I wanted to follow up on my thrown shade, and for good or ill, Walt Disney is a key figure in cultural history. He was actually born in Chicago in 1901, but his family moved around a lot throughout his youth, as his father made stabs at farming, delivering newspapers, and working in a jelly and fruit juice factory. Walt himself was more of an artist than a student, and so dropped out of high school at age 16. With a forged birth certificate, he managed to join the Red Cross Ambulance Corps to aid the US Army in the First World War. Hey, that rhymes. Disney magic. He arrived in France to help out in late 1918, shortly after the signing of the armistice that ended the First World War. He helped out with some random tasks before eventually getting a discharge the next year. He moved to Kansas City after that, hoping to become a newspaper cartoonist. He quickly became an illustrator for magazine ads, as they didn't use photos all that much in magazines back then, and did some drawings for movie theaters. He reportedly enjoyed it, but was more interested in animation. Enter into his life making cartoons. The most famous mouse in history was born early in the Disney timeline. After a few successful cartoons based on Alice in Wonderland, he developed an original character he called Mortimer Mouse. He eventually decided Mickey would be a better name. His debut was in the 1928 short film Steamboat Willie, and was one of the first cartoons ever to have synchronized sound effects. He was the late 20s version of a viral sensation. There were Mickey Mouse clubs for children, and in the truly American fashion, the success quickly followed up with merchandising and comic strips. The first voiceover for Mickey premiered in 1929's The Carnival Kid. Mickey's first words were, "hot dog." Eventually, Disney decided to voice Mickey himself, which he did until 1947. His animation company became a massive empire. He got into feature films with Snow White, and during his life collecting something like 22 Oscars and another 59 nominations. But old Walt wanted more. Disney wanted to start a little theme park near his studio in Burbank, but these plans quickly became more and more ambitious. It got to the point where in 1953, he had to hire a team of researchers to find the perfect place to build a theme park, factoring population growth, weather patterns, and transportation routes. They eventually found the home of Disneyland, a 160-acre grove of orange trees in Anaheim, California. They broke ground in 1954, and on July 17th, a year later, Disneyland opened, and it was a disaster. There was a surge of counterfeit tickets, leading to too many guests. Rides broke, the park was unfinished. Oh, and there was a gas leak that forced part of the park to close. The TV broadcast celebrating the park's opening even had technical difficulties. Early jitters aside, Walt Disney loved his park. He even kept an apartment there. One of his projects was a utopian city concept. There was a terrifying angle to that considered utopia, but we'll talk a little bit about that later. Now, we should discuss how Disney was not some magical creature divorced from his dark side, nor from historical context. As many of you have likely heard, the Disney Company was involved in creating propaganda for the United States during the Second World War. It began with some short educational films, such as a 1942 film, The New Spirit, which taught people how to file their taxes to support the war effort. Many of the propaganda films starred Donald Duck, and were in thousands of movie theaters. One even got an Academy Award nomination, as if he needed more. The education videos turned into military training videos, and Disney also designed a lot of military insignias. He had built a reputation for himself in such politically divisive times as a non-political maker of cartoons. However, he began to come around, producing blatant works of propaganda for the US Army, like the probably famous film Der Führer's Face, a film making fun of Nazis starring Donald Duck. He started to take this seriously, producing some pretty terrifying films such as Education for Death, The Making of a Nazi. He also became obsessed with a book called Victory Through Air Power, and adapted it to drum up support of use of long-range strategic bombing. It apparently worked, getting the attention of both President Roosevelt and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill. I can't show these in this video due to copyright, something else we can blame Disney for. If you can, go find these wartime Disney films. They're quite a surreal watch, and with no more than a little blatant racism when depicting the Japanese. Either way, they're quite a fascinating blip in American cultural history. Here's where we start to see an infamous side of Disney, however. He criticized a lot of the parts of Nazi ideology through these propaganda films, but one thing he never criticized was the Nazi regime's anti-Semitism. Disney was a very socially conservative man. He was a staunch capitalist, and despite criticizing a lot of Nazi ideology in films like Education for Death, embodied many of the very things he rallied against. Rumors are still commonplace that Disney was a Nazi, and while it would be unfair without evidence to call him a Nazi with a capital N, he definitely had aspects of their ideology in his politics. The better term would probably be Nazi sympathizer. Before the war, there were meetings of people openly supporting and interested in the Nazi form of government. These groups were small, but reportedly fiercely loyal and were open to the public. On a few occasions, Disney and his lawyer Gunther Lessig were spotted in attendance along with a lot of other Nazi-aligned Hollywood elites. This organization was the German-American Bund, which would eventually become the American Nazi Party of today. More on them in my neo-Nazi video, or my video on hate groups. I'm getting so sick of Nazis. Why did they have to become relevant again? He also hosted a visit from the Nazi filmmaker Leni Riefenstahl when she came to America to promote her film Olympia in 1938. You might remember her if you ever took a film class as the director behind the infamous Triumph of the Will Nazi propaganda film. This was only about a month after the notorious Kristallnacht, a night of brutal assaults on German Jewish businesses and homes. You could write this off as the West's all too comfortable relationship with the Nazi regime that we try hard to forget happened, but his peers even criticized Disney for this act. Even after the war, this whiff of anti-Semitism spilt over into his 50s politics. Amongst the hardcore anti-communists of the Red Scare, there was a common association between Jews and communists, which might have fueled their enthusiasm for destroying the lives of anyone a little too far left of center. But I don't want to spoil too much of next week's video. Oops. Disney was a full and happy player in McCarthy's purges. He was a member of many of the 50s witch-hunting organizations like the Motion Picture Alliance for the Preservation of American Ideals, which was associated with the infamous House Un-American Activities Committee, the former being notorious for it being quietly a very anti-Semitic organization. Some folks, like Disney's own grandniece Meryl Streep, have confirmed the alliance was an anti-Semitic industry lobbying group. Not too surprisingly then, Disney also had opinions about organized labor. The utopic city Epcot he imagined, it was a place where unions would be illegal, democracy non-existent, and of course, no social safety net. All enforced by his own written laws and a proto-police security force. It was like a prototype of the gated community. And this ethos followed into the corporation he created. In the 1960s, the Disney Corporation lobbied to create the Reedy Creek Improvement District, and the government gave broad authority over it to the Disney Corporation. They to this day have pretty much complete control over the land and do whatever they want with it. It's political insulation to protect them from labor regulations and competition, a true model for the corporatist worldview. Walt Disney was a longtime smoker, and in 1966 he was diagnosed with lung cancer. Only a month later, on December 15th, he died. Not long after he died, there was a rumor that he had been cryogenically frozen. This is actually a myth. He was cremated, and his ashes are in a mausoleum in California. The rumor probably persists because the first person to be cryogenically frozen was put on ice in January of 1967, just a month after Disney's death. A history of cryogenic freezing that might be a fun video. If only I had a Know Your Sci-Fi series. Today, Disney is a massive corporation and frequently lobbies governments to change policy to their will. The US is extremely long-term for copyright being an example, or the fact that Disney just flat out bought up a ton of Fox's properties in the not too distant past without the word antitrust flying anywhere. In many ways, the corporation Disney made with his values is responsible for a lot of the corporate dominance in the United States today. It's also responsible for a lot, and I mean like a metric ton of our cultural masonry. It's as ingrained a part of America as apple pie, burgers, and for-profit.
Yo, what up everybody? It's Go Deep episode 95 featuring my dog Kojay again. I don't know if we're gonna have any music in this one because the interview is long, plus the video I'm gonna put in here is long. So we're gonna cut right to it. Kojay interview episode 95. We talked about Disney, we talked about Disney's connection to the Nazis, and we talked about is Disney the Nazi connection fucking with Warner Brothers. Let's go. Alright, yeah, so you're going over to see Ramesh, huh? Sri Lanka, eh?
Yeah, I'm going there do some photography for my film project, and I figured I'd do a couple things. Definitely meeting up with Ramesh. I got some stuff for him that from Project Comic-Con, and we're going to talk about a couple of things too, because he's helping out with my project as well.
That's dope.
And it's going to be good to see him. Also, I'm going to be doing my own little charity and donations to a children's orphanage. Well, orphanages are children, of course, but I'm going to be doing that on, Thursday or something. But yeah, I'm going to hand them out some of the Snyder Cut buttons because they're cool, but I'm giving them a lot of crayons, schoolwork supplies, and little plushies, encourage the writing and the art.
Right.
And the kids are going to like it, and we're going to do a little dinner, all of them, so it's going to be cool.
That's what's up. So,
yeah.
This is Go Deep episode 95. Does not...
Bam.
Yeah, we were going to do a part 2, but let's just continue the series. This is Go Deep episode 95 instead of 94 part 2. So, what's going on, man? What's on your mind today, bro?
Well, I was left with thinking about a lot of stuff we were doing, talking about last time, which is not too long ago. But also, I was thinking I kind of did a little reverse track because we did a good big thing with Project Comic-Con, and we got that Project New York Comic-Con coming up.
Right.
And I think that's already at like $2,000. And I don't know if it's closer to 3,000. It's somewhere there.
Okay.
But that's doing good, and that's like overlooked by Will,
right?
And a couple other people who did the same for Project Comic-Con. So that's cool. So if we do the Big Apple, that'd be great.
Right. That is SDCC 2020, right? No, that's never mind. Y'all talking about New York Comic-Con now, right?
Yeah, NYCC.
Right, NYCC too. Right, gotcha. All right.
Yeah. So that's good. That's part 2. That's going on. But I wanted to share some ideas. I want to talk about like what else we could do because these shills, all those quote quote hack accusers and all that shit.
Right.
I feel like we're such a creative bunch, right? I mean, we can do more than just entertain these people who want to fight with us over petty stuff.
Right.
I just feel that they're like the little chihuahuas at the bottom just trying to bite us and keep us distracted from moving forward. Because I feel, like we said, I feel like we leveled up. And oh my gosh, that Kevin Smith thing just happened, right?
Right. Kevin Smith, that...
I just saw that.
That was today, or was that something he said a while back?
I don't know. I just found out before, while I was waiting for you. Because I was finishing up some stuff and some shopping for the trip.
Right.
And... in fact, you probably know more about that than me.
Yeah, he said something about Snyder Cut exists, get over it, or something. It was, I can't even find the tweet anymore. I'm trying to look for it, but
yeah, it was something like that.
Right, and that was dope. I like that he said that. He's been saying that now for about 6 months.
I know, right? And he's like respectable amongst multiple type of nerd groups and geeks too. So
Right.
that's just a really good wake up call. But and the bad side is that we were told by Zack Snyder himself, but apparently his word doesn't count. It
Right,
feels like
right.
there's still that bias going on. But anyways, um, that's cool. That's a win. But what I'm thinking about is like, what more can each of us fans do? And I was
Right.
thinking about this because I know in the chat I said I mentioned this that I have an idea about doing a little promo commercial or something, but
Which chat did you say that in?
it's one of the ones with Spartan, and I
Oh, right,
know
right,
that
right,
doesn't
right,
narrow
right.
it down,
Right.
but it's probably on Twitter. But I was thinking we have so many people who do graphic arts, like Ramesh. He's just killing it. Each one of his artworks that he does is like a scene from a Snyder Cut movie that we have not seen yet, but we
Right.
recognize because it captures that beauty and that style.
Right,
And
definitely.
he's doing that, and we do this podcast, and we're doing a couple things, but I think each person can creatively do more.
Okay.
Like if someone is good at editing a video, do something funny, put the word out. I mean, I feel like we should all kind of creatively use social media, not just to kind of like just be like the morale support for anyone trying to hit us with ignorance. Of course we should do that, but I don't think we should spend too much time there
Right.
because the truth is closer on our side.
Right.
Despite the bias and the propaganda.
Right.
And to help it, I think we should celebrate this positive love that we have. Like, listen to the past Go Deep episodes. I hear everyone's like very sincere, motivated, fed up,
Right.
inspired, empowered, all these good things. And I think if we put it into something, like if someone can make a song, or if someone wants to do a video or a video essay, or whatever, just I think we should do more things to entertain people and then get the message out. Find fun ways to express our love for this and put it out. Like, for example, I'm thinking of a little tiny short film idea where I'm Kojay. I'm going to go up against a bunch of ninjas of Warner Brothers to save something. And I'll leave it at there. I have this idea all mapped out, and I want to shoot that as soon as I get back. And then the end will be like Snyder Cut or something. Release a Snyder Cut.
Right.
And I'm even thinking of some dance videos to do just to show, and then have like Snyder Cut there. Different ways to entertain, but put the word out.
Right.
Without sounding like some kind of weird Scientology cult, which we are not. In fact, we're against that,
Right. Do we sound
as
like
far as
that?
I know.
Do we sound like that right now?
No, I don't think we do, but I think the people who are judging us, trying to change the tone and dumb us down, because the negative screen junkies or whatever.
Right.
I know he was just being stupid and all, but at the same time, he's entertaining ignorance by choice. And that tone that's accepted and practiced, I mean, that's something we can't just fight at with fire. I think we gotta, get that negativity gone with water. Right. And we gotta just keep on expressing the Snyder Cut in any creative way we can, in a positive, entertaining, fun way.
Right.
Or informative way,
Right.
I think we need more of that, just to, because then that's more welcoming, because it is. And from what I learned at Comic-Con, that was not in that foolish video by whoever. I don't even want to say their name. It's not worthy anymore.
Who?
But no, the screen junkies.
Oh yeah. Hold on a minute.
Because
real quick.
Yeah.
Fuck screen junkies.
Oh, okay, yeah, there we go. Fuck screen junkies. So, the fact that we were saying serious stuff and they just kind of brushed it over,
right.
Like John Boy said, pretty much he's sick of the prejudice,
right,
racism in his beautiful way.
Correct.
And then the guy translated is that release the cut.
Right.
After he asked what's the reason, and he didn't even reiterate the reason. That was a perfect example of how they're changing and lying the narrative in their own fucking video right there in like 2 seconds.
Correct.
It's right there.
Correct.
So I feel to combat that is to do what me, John Boy, and the rest of the people did when we were handing out stuff, is express the truth because it's a beautiful thing. It's a good thing. It's not an aggressive thing. It's like, hey, you want to check out the movie? What is it? Oh, it's this. Oh, okay, I understand. Oh, I get to see more Wonder Woman. I love Wonder Woman.
Right.
I want to see her tough and da da da. It's always generating good stuff. So I think we should, each of us can find ways or team up with the other one to push that positivity out there. Because we even have people who are good at editing. And you know how, oh, I'm forgetting his name. The guy who reanimated the deleted scene of Cyborg learning to fly again.
Yeah.
He's doing the black suit edition.
Yeah. I know who you're talking about. I don't remember his name, though, but I know who you're talking about.
I don't remember his name, too. But huge shout out to him.
Right.
Because he's doing something like that so we could see more of the beauty of what was promised, what was already there. You know, stuff like that. They're using their abilities for that. You're doing this go deep, you know, doing that. I think everyone should find something and use social media to express this in a positive way. And also, let's also keep promoting the AFSP,
right?
Because looking at their stuff, it's such a beautiful site. I mean, some of their posts have made me feel good and less depressed. And too, because that's what Snyder's doing too.
Right.
So I think if we go in go closer to the light by example, I think that's going to shine a brighter light on this beautiful thing we're trying to save.
So where would we start? How would we start? What would we?
Anyone, for example, me. I know I'm going to do a video and see if that's entertaining in Snyder Cut. That's what I'm going to do. You're already doing something with Go Deep, but let's say one of our Spartans is good at editing or making a music video. They could probably do something beautiful and then post that. Or I'm saying is everyone try and find some way to express it in an entertaining, fun way, a positive way, you know? So and then just not waste too much time fighting about with people who already hate it ignorantly.
Right. The dude's name is Chris Dawson, right?
Chris Dawson.
Black Suit Edition, is that his name?
Oh, it sounds familiar. Yes, that's him. Yes.
All right.
Huge shout out to Chris Dawson. Here's another example, all right? And this is also doubling as a shout out. And I hope this is all making sense. But I'm with this guy named Ahmad. He's known as Moise on Instagram. He's directing his own animated Justice League and one of the voice actors on it, along with several other people.
Salandria,
especially John Salandria? There we go.
Yeah, he told me about that.
Yeah, that's the project we're on, and we have a lot of creative guys on there. So this is a whole shout out to the whole team, and it's probably going to come out in 2 years from now. But everyone's passionate about it, and they're doing something to celebrate it, whether it comes out before or after or during Snyder Cut release. It's still going to be a beautiful thing to promote it and just be thankful for it. You know, just like doing something.
Right.
So I just encourage everybody to try and find it. Look for it and then present it. You know, use social media in like an informative, positive light for this.
Right.
You know, because I think that's all we got. I mean, we're requesting it, so why don't we find other ways to request it?
Right.
So I think that's the answer for us to step it up and not waste time being dragged down by certain individuals causing shit.
Right.
And then maybe we can work our way up the pyramid or make the people on top of the asshole pyramid come down and go, okay, we submit. We hear you.
All right. So check this out. So to sum it all up, you're saying stop worrying about the assholes that's causing trouble and just keep...
or keep it brief with them, you know?
Right. Okay, so check this out. But, you know, you got a lot of, like, introverts in our movement. We got a lot of people who's shy and they just like to type shit, you know? So a lot of times... there was this one kid, he was in LA, this is right before I met you, and he used to go find a bunch of like Zack Snyder stuff that was like kind of hidden in the industry or whatever. So I used to tell him, I was like, yo dude, how about you go be like a on-scene correspondent for Go Deep, and then you can go out and find this stuff on the streets and go in front of Warner Brothers place and just, you know, talk or speak on it, and I'll put it on the podcast. And he was like...
You asked me to do that too, right?
Yeah, I did. I did actually do that.
And I'm trying when I can.
No, I mean, you kind of did the same thing, but you just being on Go Deep, you do enough, you know. But homeboy, what his response? He was like he was too shy and shit, you know. He was too shy to get in front of a camera. So I was like,
Ah.
you know. So I think like a lot of people are like that. But I do.
And
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
no, go on. I was just gonna add on.
I was just gonna say I do agree with we kind of gotta ignore those people. But check this out. I'm asking you this question: do you think we're the majority or they're the majority? Because it's like sometimes you see when those guys put up little stupid ass posts and they're like, oh, these guys still believe there's a Snyder Cut, and like 2,000 people just laugh at it under their shit. We can't get 2,000 people to say anything on our posts, you know. So it's like, damn, are we the minority? You know, are we just in our own little bubble and we don't get it? And do everybody else get it and we're missing it? Or do they miss it and we're getting it? I haven't figured that out yet, you know?
I have a faith in the equation. I think I think it's like I think it's a lot like Star Wars. Okay, whoever is causing, whoever is the block between Snyder Cut coming out, everything that we talked about, and we could continue go deep into that too, all our theories,
right?
Which I love doing. But that's like Darth Sidious, you know. And then all the sheep are all the stormtroopers, and there's a shitload of them. Oh, no wonder they're white. Sheep. I just realized that all the stormtroopers are like 90% of their gear is white, and then 10% is black. Just like the sheep, the face and the hooves are black, and then
you're funny,
well done,
dude.
George Lucas. Anyways, so okay, all the stormtroopers are sheep, right?
Right.
Now I think all the civilians are in the world are the people who are just casual, you know, like. There's this one dude who hit me, who I think Jeff, was it Jeff? I don't know. Well, one of our Spartans or Snyder Cut supporters, like, you know, was talking to this person, and this person was just kind of like a 12-year-old responding with profanity and all this stuff and accusations and using the hack thing. So I know you learned it from somewhere up top. But going with this. Oh yeah, when I saw that, and then I saw their page just to see maybe they're just angry on this topic. But every single thing on their page was fuck this, this is stupid, this is a bitch, this is a whatever, blah, 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 all this negative and negative and negative. I was like, dang, that's the whole page. Right. I think I found 2 positive posts, and they were about the NBA. That's it. And it's just this practice negativity, and I don't think a lot of people are like that. Right. So I would call that person a shill, a stormtrooper, you know, one of the sheep, because they're just going out of their way just to shit on stuff. Right. And I was even looking for anything positive. Is there, well, maybe they have a favorite movie, this and that. No, they didn't put a lot of stuff in there. It was just a lot of negative stuff. Right. So that would be like the stormtrooper. But the regular person who, like, one of my actresses, she's actually a good friend of mine, so she's a friend. Her husband, his favorite movie is Man of Steel. That's his go-to movie. He like watches it like 3 times a month, or whatever, you know. Right. And he doesn't have a Twitter. He doesn't have a Facebook. He doesn't bother to Yelp even. Right. And that's just his jam. And he always talks great about it. And, you know, it's you know, I like him because he likes Man of Steel, of course. Right. But he gets it. And then when we were at Comic-Con, there was a majority of people who did get it, but they just don't voice themselves. So I think in the Star Wars metaphor, the a-hole or a-holes is Sidious, the sheep are all the stormtroopers, and there's a shitload of them. Right. And the regular people are mostly for it and down for it, including our friends who aren't even Snyder Cut fans. That's like the civilians in the galaxy, and the civilians in the galaxy outnumber Empire, I believe. Right. And the rebellion are the people, but the people willing to fight, the people willing to step up. Like, we do have a lot of shy, introverted people, but they are passionate, sharing, vocal, on Snyder Cuts. So they are doing what they can too. Right. And I feel each person I listen to who is an introvert, each person I talk to, I feel like they're becoming more inspired and more brave, and I feel like they're going to tap something brilliant and they're going to go with that. And I just want to call out, it's like, hey, find it, go for it,
right,
push it,
right.
show us what you got. It's there. But as far as your ratio, I think we're like the rebellion. That amount of numbers, it's a lot. We are outnumbered.
I get that.
We are the minority, but morally, I feel we morally outnumber their asses.
Right. Hold on a sec. I got to run outside and give somebody my key to the house. I'll be right back.
All right.
Give like a few seconds.
For sure. Hope it's not Jason. With the ski mask and shit.
You're a retard, dog. I'll be right back.
I'm just looking out for you.
Yeah, dog. I left a shit ton of money in my car, and I told somebody to go roll up my windows and lock my car.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I's back.
Welcome back. Oh, good thing you did that.
Yeah, I just thought about it. All right, so where we were at. Yeah, I agree. I do think we're like the Jedi, and the Jedi were a lot less than the Stormtroopers. You're right. But did the Empire end up winning? Well, we don't know. It's still going on. But check this out. So we were, I guess, what we're talking about is finding better things to do for the for the movement, right? So let's say if we have pretty much you know all the Jedi, you know all the Spartans. What could we do, let's say, because I only really talk to the Spartans. I don't really talk to anybody else outside of the Spartans. Maybe I should start, but what could we do? What could we do as Spartans to kind of ramp up the movement?
Ramp up the movement. Well, other than what I said everybody could do, I think when we go back in, I'll share some of my ideas.
Right.
Maybe that could bounce an idea off of someone else, or maybe someone wants to help me, and in the way of helping me, it can spawn an idea of theirs. Or if they have an idea but they're not a camera person, right, they could totally hit up someone who is, like maybe me or right, Will or someone else. Like someone can fill in the spot. Like, oh, I got a really good essay, or thing to say, but I don't know how to say it. And can you read it for me or do it? And we'll do it.
You know what I'm thinking?
Props too.
Now that you say that, I'm thinking like, what if people just send me video messages and shit like that? I can edit them on Go Deep and throw them in here, exactly like that huge video message we did that one time. We could do another one, and then there was that other one where that first one where it was this guy talking about him and his daughter, how BVS brought them closer together, and it was a beautiful video, and I think it was one of the first ones. Right, that was when everybody was saying thank you to Zack Snyder, right?
Yeah, it was that one, and then released the Snyder Cut, And I remember Batman of San Antonio, he was in that one. That guy's cool. Yeah. And then that's an example, or even like our brothers in Egypt. Right. Who wanted to just make a picture in front of the pyramids saying release the Snyder Cut. Even staging a picture or something positive and beautiful, that's enough too. It doesn't have to be anything visual, just more. I think we need to just give more media to social media for Snyder Cut. Right. Because look at Zack Snyder, he's communicating to us through his creative outlets of what he could tell us. Right. And the people of us who are I don't want to say we know how to read. I want to say we enjoy reading deeper. Right. Some people don't want to read. I'm off of work. I don't want to do any mathematics today. Blah, 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 blah. Right. Of course, I feel that too sometimes. Right. But just like I said, in practice, I like strategy. I like thinking. I like that's just me. And and I feel it's healthy for the mind. Anyways, we went over that. Right. By the way, stop me if I repeat. I'm getting old and I'm repeating shit. What? So
how close are you to WB Studios?
I think they're 60 miles away from me. But when I go to train or meet up with my talent for my film, right, I pass the Warner Brothers studios like a lot. Right. They are. So I used to work with a lot of the artists at NYFA, New York Film Academy, and it's right next to one of the lots of Warner Brothers. In fact, the far back lot, it looks like the spot where they filmed Supergirl season 1 when she was fighting Red Tornado.
Right.
That was kind of cool. That's on one of the Warner Brothers lots next to that. If I'm thinking of the right one, it's the one next to that big mortuary or whatever on the other side. But anyways, yeah, I'm close-ish.
So how's the foot traffic in that area? Is it like mainly just interstate, or is it people just walking by?
It's mixed. Oh, it's a weird spot. The one area I'm thinking about near Studio City, it's like just above like Universal,
Right.
like maybe like a bunch of blocks away. Some of their buildings, like on the opposite street, is like just homes, and then another one there's like a grocery center and a Del Taco. It's kind of weird. It's spread up and around different kind of business buildings too.
Right.
And
so
yeah.
So here's what I'm asking: why don't you go out, like have Warner Brothers Studios as a backdrop? Now tell me if I'm putting too much on your plate, and maybe you and JB go out and do what Screen Junkies did at Comic-Con. And
ask people passing by stuff.
Right. Just ask them.
Oh, that's what you meant. Oh, that traffic. My bad. I was thinking driving traffic. Foot traffic. It's a bit of a stretch.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's also right next to the 134.
Right.
And so you get a lot of people just get off the freeway, just go straight home and stuff.
Right.
But you know those people who took pictures where they're giving the bird to Warner Brothers or whatever. You could do that. You could be on that area and take that picture, just like those people who took the picture of Lisa's Snyder Cut.
Right.
And some of them were in cosplay.
Yeah.
Those public places, but there's not a lot of foot traffic.
Yeah,
but that is a good idea. We could probably do that. Maybe not Warner Brothers, but with tourists on the Chinese Theater, or maybe near Amoeba Records or something.
Right.
Maybe me and John Boy could figure something out like that, and then do a flip on Film Fuckers and no, Screen Fuckers. There we go. I just want to rename them just because I don't want to give them credit.
Right, something like that, and then send it to me. If you want, I'll edit it up, but I damn sure want to put it on Go Deep. Oh
yeah, for sure. Or I'll just put it together and I'll just send you the file and you do it.
All right.
That like that. Boom. That's an idea. I think if we talk amongst ourselves, or talk about, like, there's even some people I know who like at my kid's first birthday, right? I had some friends from LA come down.
Right.
One of them was my good friend. He's a cinematographer. He graduated from NIFA. He's doing really well. Brilliant guy, but he's stuck doing car commercials and he hates it.
Right.
And he's told me, I'm thinking about moving to a different state because in different states there's a stronger source of indie film, and he's correct. And there's some companies interested in, so he's going to relocate and do some more art, which is great. But I see him, and he was just telling me he knows everything about the Snyder Cut, like he was screwed over or whatever. He just doesn't follow because it's not his favorite, no problem. But he has no ill will. He has no negative judgment.
Right.
But he said, hey, it's cool that you're sticking up for a director because too many of us get screwed over.
Right.
He's not a Snyder fan. But he works in the industry and he recognizes what happened to Snyder, and he already sympathizes. He's a smart guy. He knows, right? So, he was like, hey, man, if you need a video for your Snyder Cut stuff before I leave, I'm down to help. So we could reach out to other people who are just down to help us.
Right.
Who necessarily aren't Spartans or for the Snyder Cut too, because essentially it is just for the people, really.
Right. Well,
so I think if we talk more, we could come up with more ideas like we just did right here.
Right. And you know what I think? We need RT Snyder Cut on YouTube. I mean, on Twitter. We need to come up with another tweet. You know how they did it? Like a tweet event that time, and we went trending on Twitter all night.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we could do some tweets like that, but as long as we keep this release a Snyder Cut tweet, the main tweet going. I mean, main hashtag.
Right. We need.
Yeah, that's another idea too.
Right. Because Twitter really gets a lot of attention. Once we went trending on that then more publications showed up, remember?
Yeah, and I think we found a strong ground to battle, you know?
Right.
And I think our second one would be YouTube going on. Because I did a lot of my first battling for Release of Snarka started on Instagram, really.
Right. That's
And
where
then,
I saw your Instagram.
Yeah, I was looking at my first Release of Snarka post, and I was like, oh, that's the first one. So that's where it spawned for me. And then I decided to move my narrative from Instagram into my games channel, and then essentially I found my way going to Twitter because everything links to Twitter. I was like, okay, I'll share Twitter. Okay, I'll share Twitter. Then I saw like a lot of voices are heard more on Twitter, so I was like, all right, let me just bring the narrative to there because I want it all to be connected in. I think our voices are being heard more because Vero's great and nice, but it's kind of like
select
instead of in the city talking to all the people with different lives passing by, we're kind of just in the forest with our homies going, yeah, you know, and that's great and all, you know, the s'mores are great, the air is beautiful, the air is fresh and clean, but I think we gotta go to the city where everyone is, where the pollution's great and the food is meh, and then we gotta figure it out.
Oh my god, you are retarded as shit.
I mean, that's what it feels like. I mean, I love Vero, and then, you know, Zach's on Vero, so we gotta go to the mountains and go, hey, you know, what you got? Oh, a new picture. Oh, thank you. Da da da. There's hope. I'll do you proud. You know.
All right, I got you. So that's our first 30 minutes of shit, and now we're gonna get into our deep 30 minutes of shit. All right.
All right. What's up?
I don't know. So we left off last night on some deep shit. And if you look at it, your podcast has been projected #1 all day. So obviously people like what you said or what we talked about last night, right?
Oh, thank God, because, you know, when it was done, I was like, oh, my career is over, and it's just a hobby. I don't know.
No, man, you killed it. If you don't have a career in Hollywood anymore, you definitely got one on YouTube, bro. You should have told me don't put it out if you ever feel like, damn, I fucked up.
Oh, no. I was just saying because, you know, I'm originally shy as fuck. I think martial arts and being a dancer got me out of my shell, and I found courage to, you know, be less afraid. And so sometimes the old school me, the shy, like no, don't, I'm nobody, I'm here. A lot of times that comes back out, and that's who I am, and I accept it. So
let me ask you,
I'm shy too sometimes.
Not on the alien shit right yet, but this sounds some plausible shit too. Check this out.
What's up?
What if Disney and Warner Brothers have been working together, right? And
I thought that too, like Warner Brothers being a dummy company.
Right. Like
because you know Disney had Miramax for the rated R people and all that,
right? And
they had Touchstone Pictures. That's how Nightmare Before Christmas was able to work its way into Disney life so fast. And they even had a record label where you know that rap group of Insane Clown Posse, those dudes.
Yeah.
The guys who dress up like clowns and they just do crazy rap. Yeah, they technically their record label was owned by Disney too. So ICP is Disney in a way if you think about it at one point.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I remember that in like what, junior year of high school or something. Yeah.
So what if Disney and Warner Brothers have been secretly working together and they were like, yo, Zack Snyder is kind of hurting our business because, yo, if he keeps making these dope-ass movies, nobody's going to want to watch the MCU no more. We need to get Zack out. They call Warner Brothers and they say the exact same thing, and Warner Brothers like, yeah, no problem. We take him, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, man. I mean, I've thought that for a long time, too, and often just using the midichlorians in my foot, you know? I was just thinking about that. It just kind of came to me. I have no proof. It's just a vibe.
Right.
But it's a huge hunch, and it's one of my favorite conspiracy theories because every now and then there's like a pattern. There's like, okay, some news about Pattinson's Batman comes out, and then some news about Marvel comes out, and then some
Right.
news about this one comes out. It's like they do this kind of pong effect going back and forth, and sometimes I don't know when. I don't keep track of this stuff because I got life and a kid, right? So sometimes it just feels like there's a pattern and a rhythm that tells me that they're all part of one. Like maybe unfortunately Warner Brothers used to be trailblazers, at one point. Maybe maybe Disney sold Miramax, Touchstone Pictures, and whatever label they had Insane Clown Posse on or whatever. And then maybe they did buy Warner Brothers, or maybe they hired people like some companies hire people just to spy on other companies, just to work for them or whatever. So maybe they have people who like moved on in and took control of maybe Toby is a Disney guy. Who knows? Just playing with this, conspiracy theory, right?
Right.
Because if that is true, then Zach putting the Disney ears on Nixon in Watchmen was the sign that was coming in.
Right.
Because that was, I think, because his movies had barely been altered by studio until Sucker Punch came around. I believe that's when studio started fucking with his stuff, and we saw them slowly screwing it up with other films as well. Not just him.
He put the Mickey Mouse ears, and they were like devil horns on it too, wasn't it?
Yeah. I saw the devil horns first, then I saw the circles around his head, some other time later, when watching it, right? And I was like, that's funny, right? And
so
I forgot I was going, but yeah.
So here's what you're fucking retarded.
Like what if Disney, WB stands for "we bitches" now, WB
stands for "we bitches."
Yeah, we bitches. It's like Disney is in control or something and telling them what to do, to elevate their stuff.
Where would AT&T come in at this? Because think about this. Remember, maybe last year. Oh, look at my camera just came back on. You see my hat?
Nah.
Oh,
shit. I need to turn on my screen. Oh, you rocking it?
Hell yeah.
Are you rocking?
All right, I'm gonna turn it back off. So remember.
Oh, I missed it. It's all good.
All right, never mind. So remember, Gal Gadot was talking to, I think it was Chris Pine or somebody from Marvel, and then she was like, "Oh, we love their movies. I can't wait till there be a nice crossover," or something stupid like that. She said on Twitter, and everybody was like, "Huh? No, we don't want a crossover between Marvel and DC." But they said it, and they did a little smile and a wink. So then I'm like, God damn, is this about to happen? But then AT&T came in and bought them. So I'm like, oh, well, nope. Because it was at the time when Disney was trying to buy everybody. Remember, they were trying to buy Sony.
Yeah.
And then when AT&T came in, I thought it was the saving grace. But it don't look like AT&T has really, cleaned up the spilled milk. It just seems like they're still letting them go with making more dumb, stupid choices, So it's like, damn, does Disney...
Unless unless AT&T was just buying them just to stop such a merger, such a monopoly, and they're like, whatever.
Okay, so then, but you don't think if they were buying them to stop a monopoly, you don't think they would want to have any creative control in it? Or they're just like, fuck it, it's all about money?
You could go either way. Damn. Depending on who they are. I really don't know. But that was the one hunch I had.
You think Disney got that much of a hold on the whole industry?
I don't know. It sounds like they...
So Joss Whedon from Disney. Gunn, whatever his name, that do Suicide Squad 2 from Disney. James Gunn.
I mean, maybe. I mean... Also, because Michael Jackson, before he was dying, he was buying up a whole bunch of music rights and contracts, and I think there was some article saying somewhere that if he had lived, he would have gone to the grave with 90% of the music industry or some shit like that.
Right, I remember that.
Yeah. So, and that's just him and he had a huge ass empire, right, of his success.
Right.
And Disney is an pinnacle of entertainment empire. So I wouldn't rule out that they want to buy everything.
So they could very well say, "Hey, Zack Snyder's bad for the MCU. We got to get him out of here." And Warner Brothers is like, "Okay, whatever. We'll do what you got to do."
I would buy that, and that bothers me because I hate censorship, because that gives leeway of people trying to control, anything they want.
Damn.
Like remember? Did you know that the Rocky movies, all the sequels were banned from Russia at one point?
No.
Except the first one.
Because they beat up Drago or something?
No. Here's the reason. The first one is, at the time, the reason and this is from like a lot of teachers and everything I read it back then. So this is probably obsolete. I don't know if it's available in Russia. I have to ask my Russian friends actually about that. Okay, I gotta do that later. But anyways, I remember definitely in the 90s, all the Rocky sequels were banned from Russia, but the first one was allowed because it was a person from a lower class who towards the end realized his place and accepted it and just did his best and accepted his defeat at the end with pride. Even though that wasn't the theme of the movie, that's one way to look at the actuality of the situation. And then the other part where he's going against all odds, and then he beats Apollo Creed, not just breaks even, he gets the title, and he elevates himself from lower class to middle class, and then he goes through that whole Clubber Lang thing, and he even goes to higher class. And the fourth one, he's got a robot. And then at that point, they bring in the Russians as bad guys, because maybe they're like, okay, well, these movies aren't going to Russia anyways. Let's make a little statement here with Rocky IV, and which was really cute. And I love Rocky IV. So then, that's that thing. So like, because I was thinking about this after our last one. So you have these little messages, and the message is banned because they don't want that message there. Like even. You see a change in Hong Kong cinema too. Before China reclaimed, had Hong Kong. Before Hong Kong, it was like still British ruled, British law. So you got like a lot of rugged movies coming out. You even had kung fu movies where they're going up against the king or the emperor or whatever, and it was just very free. You could tell any story. They even had The Untold Story, which was a true story of this guy who slaughtered a family with chopsticks. It was horrible. But, they're free to tell any kind of story. But then when China got in, a lot of Hong Kong movies, the budget got a lot better for some of them. And but you didn't see much of the narrative changed, and you don't see much of the emperor or the leader or whatever, being the villain,
right,
or whatever,
right.
per se. And the reason why Hero was so I don't know why I said Japanese, but Hero, the Zhang Yimou movie,
right, I love that movie.
That Zack Snyder borrows that the arrows coming at Jet Li,
right.
He did that with Leonidas,
right?
Because Hero came out in 2002 and it came out in America 2004. And I hated that one because the theme of the film, okay, the guy's supposed to kill the emperor, but he has, there's spoilers, but the movie's been out for ages.
Yeah, so it's already
out
long time ago.
Okay, then I don't feel guilty, but whatever. So anyways, the ending of that is that the Jet Li's character was convinced at the end that the emperor is the only guy to bring peace to the land. Right?
Make them all.
And so then the ending of the film, or the whole point, was to reassure the king to get on a good path. So the king is still the winner in the end,
Right.
Physically and politically. Right. And then stuff like that is always good, because even another Zhang Yimou one he did, like Curse of the Golden Flower. Again, the king was a bad guy, but politically and physically he won. But that is the story. But that's the type of stories that they kind of encourage. And then all the other stories, we still get this stuff, but it's mostly amongst the little clans and groups. And then they have more fantasy stories coming out. So they don't really encourage themes of a threat of power anymore, or as much. And I wonder if it's that kind of censorship, you know? Censorship doesn't mean it's a good thing. It's not just because I know like Evil Dead 2 was banned in like France for a long time only because it had a lot of blood. Okay, that's censorship I can understand because, you know, that's maybe too excessive or too vulgar.
Right.
Stuff like that I understand. But if it's themes, content, and intent that's being censored, like I understand censoring content, you know, because, you know, you have to be at a certain maturity, but censoring intent, that one bothers me. Right. And then the whole changes to like Justice League is an example of all that trying to control the intent, you know?
Right. But they did it first with Suicide Squad. Remember? That wasn't allowed to show.
Yeah. That's when they first, because they gave it to, I remember reading that it was the trailers that were so good.
Right.
That they had the people, the house that did the trailer to edit the film. But that doesn't make sense.
But
because
remember
they didn't make the film.
They didn't want to show it in China either because they said it had too much supernatural shit. And I think it was banned in China, or they just didn't open it in China or something like that. But it didn't play in China because they said it had supernatural. But it wasn't Zack Snyder's movie. So was it just Warner Brothers losing his nuts or what?
I wouldn't rule out Warner Brothers losing their nuts or them like worshiping their investors over, because you know, I'm a wrestling fan. I always say that, haha. But Vince McMahon, after that whole Saudi situation with that reporter, that missing person in the death situation,
right?
A lot of people were uncomfortable with Vince McMahon going to the Middle East to do a show, and he was hired by the royal family to bring the whole WWE to do a pay-per-view show in their country, not once, not twice, but 3 times. Right. And a lot of wrestlers are feeling uncomfortable about that, and I think a lot of fans are feeling uneasy about that too, just because of you know, just the politics surrounding it and everything.
Did he go?
I don't need to talk about that stuff, but the concern is, are they putting fans, the audience below, and investors above? If Warner Brothers, WWE, any corporation, if they're putting investors above audience, then maybe the audience is losing power. And then maybe the audience is going to suffer. And then the product is going to suffer. And then the whole thing falls apart. And then someone's grand freaking scheme is going to win in the end. I don't know.
Wouldn't that be like why they put the Russian family in there? Why else would they have a Russian family in there? Because maybe there's a lot of Russian
Let's talk
investors.
to 44 about that. I think he nailed that perfectly.
Yeah, no, I went to sleep all night last night.
Because
so I didn't read it.
Let's say the investors are mostly racist Europeans or whatever,
right?
And they're like, we see this movie, and I don't know what accent I'm doing.
No, keep that accent.
Like,
I like
this movie,
that.
And then, huh?
I said, keep that accent. I like that.
I don't even know what it is. But okay, let's say if they see it and they're like, we see that there's a lot of tension on Cyborg. Can we change that a little bit? Oh, okay, yeah. We'll bow to your wishes. It's possible that could happen because that's a huge story element, and I was looking forward to that. There's so much content. There's so many scenes, and you could tell the scenes that are taken out were a bunch of aha moments with a lot of build-up and all Cyborg, just like 44 said. That was Ray Fisher's breakout film. To say that that's his breakout film means he was a key role. Right. And then they take the Black American out, African American out, and replace it with a Russian family, just like 44. And 44 nailed it. Listen to that one. He's got it. But yeah, and there you go.
And that could point more to Disney because, you know, think about it, like I don't know if this is conspiracy theory or not, but even back in the day, Disney always had these little like sneaky like sex stuff in there or sneaky like racism hidden messages in there.
Oh, I heard, well, okay, that was back when I was an art major.
Right.
And what my teacher told me, and she just finished doing animation for whatever, working on some animated TV show. But she was telling me that a lot of those were sabotaged on purpose by the artists because they didn't like being dicked over by Disney at the time with whatever is going on with their job, either over hours or mistreated. So they purposely decided to sabotage that. That's what I heard from my teacher.
So they put
I'm going with it.
They put like dicks in.
Yeah, they did. I have the VHS of Ariel, Little Mermaid.
Yeah.
And I keep it as a collector.
Yeah.
Just because it's precious. It's the original one where they have the erection on top of the palace.
Right.
And it's so clear. Every single arch is like the Fortress of Solitude for Ariel, Little Mermaid. Everything's clean, jutting. And then you see this one, you're like, why is that thicker? Why is it round on top? What's that rim? Why does it have a vein? That's weird, you know?
Right.
And then the priest, he's got this, it looks like a finger coming out of his pants. And it's in the frame. Digitally, they fix it. But I have that on VHS. It's there. And I was like, okay.
Yeah,
because I saw it after the teacher pointed it out. And I was like, in the class. I was like, hey, okay, I believe teacher now.
Okay,
Whoa.
okay. So you don't think Disney has anything to do with that? All right, check this out. Former VP.
No, because they also change it later.
Right, okay. But former VP of Disney just got arrested on child sex shit with a 7-year-old, sexual abuse. Like that shit has been hanging over Disney.
Man.
That shit been hanging over Disney's head for a while, dog. Or not just or say like how they buying up everything and trying to take over everything. That's kind of like people even throw like that Nazi shit.
So you breaking up?
All right, can you hear me?
Oh yeah, I just heard Nazi shit.
Right. So people.
All I heard was Disney Nazi shit. I was like, oh, okay.
No, I'm saying people kind of even throw like the Nazi shit to Disney. Like they're kind of like underground sex cult Nazis that made Disney. Do you feel any truth to that?
I could buy it because that's the perfect cover.
So now we get.
I would buy it, but I'm not. These are all theory and hunches and conspiracy.
Yeah.
But I would believe it.
Right. It is the perfect cover, right? It is the perfect cover. You be all this sex cult shit and you do all this stuff to attract more kids and bam, with the way this world is going right now, I think I could believe some shit like that.
I think this is the way of the world has been for a while. I just think that certain circles moved into circles that they weren't there before.
Like what?
Like, let's say there's a huge, this is a huge what if. We'll stay true to Marvel, right? What if there's a huge, like, little organization that, let's say, they do human trafficking or whatever, right?
Right.
What if they were doing it through this company cover or whatever, and then, things would change if someone's onto them. Maybe they have to relocate so they stay fresh, and then maybe they relocated for a while or not too long ago into the entertainment side,
right? Right. Okay.
Because like I said, it could be a perfect cover because there's so much dodgy shit you could get around because like an NDA, you can't say anything that goes on in set. Right. So what's to say someone can't do a drug deal on set and everyone stays quiet because they don't want to lose their precious jobs because it's hard as fuck to get anywhere because of the assholes I mentioned in the last podcast.
Right.
So that's also another thing that could be a perfect cover. And just like how I said, like what? There's not a lot of human resources encouraged in the industry too. Like I forgot what I was gonna say. Oh yeah, like the shitty shit. Like Vince McMahon has his employee, his wrestler sign up. Okay, you're an independent contractor, but you can't work for anybody else. So no health and benefits. Shit like that. Right. Oh, and guess who puts out wrestling's digital videos? Warner Brothers. Right. So that's funny. Right. So you get this malpractice that really isn't, policed. Well, not policed, but there's almost no consequences because they're so protected. It could work as a perfect cover to move things around.
Right. And look at all the people that go, the Disney Mouseketeer kids that always seem like they go crazy after a while, you know, like Britney Spears and what's her name, Lohan, Lindsay Lohan and shit, you know, like.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't know if I could. See, that's weird because I don't know if they're like just victims or if they're part of it or, you know, if just things are hard. It's hard to say there. I don't want to stretch it too thin.
So.
But I could see if, you know, they got caught in the mix or something.
So, all right, you know, like the MK Ultra, the mind control shit from back after the Nazis were doing it, and you know.
Oh, that crazy shit, yeah.
Right. I mean, Disney is perfect for mind control. They got all the girls thinking a knight in shining armor is supposed to come and kiss them. They're waiting for their prince and all the guys. You know, I mean, it's the perfect place for mind control, you know? And, all right, think about this. I'm going to attach...
It could be, but man, I love Moana. You know, that shit's good. that movie's legit, dog.
Yeah, maybe. All right. Former Disney executive have been convicted of sexually abusing a 7-year-old girl. This was, what was this? June 18th, 2019. So this was last month.
Yeah. See, here's the thing. I don't know how big Disney is for, like, okay, let's say there's a huge, let's see, a campus, right? Right. And all the teachers are evil and they're doing stuff behind. And then there's another college, equal success and whatever. But the guy in charge, only he's the dick. And then he's working with his buddies along the side, but the rest of the company, and they're all innocent and oblivious to what's going on. I mean, there's also a lot of variables to take into account, depending on how big the place is. Definitely. But even that, even if the whole company is innocent, you could take just one bad apple in power to, you know, weasel their way around, you know?
Could be. Could be, but you can also...
Because, like, look at Bryan Singer, right? He's always... Something's coming up with him, like sexual assaults or sexual stuff against little boys, right? Right. And I don't like that, and it keeps coming up, and then I don't hear any consequences for that dude. Well, I mean, where's his trial? What's going on? Right. And I don't get a good vibe from him, and the fact that he has, like, you know, it's almost like a Michael Jackson rate of sexual assault charges, and kind of makes you go, And also, going back to his Superman Returns, in the end, Superman sneaks into a child's room. His illegitimate child whispers things to him that he's going to teach him later, and then vanishes, and he's all proud of it, having a kid out of wedlock. I'm like, that is not Superman. Right. That is freaking Bryan Singer's best dream come true, and it's a nightmare.
Right. But I'm trying to tie it. I'm like, look at Claire Bronfman, former Seagram's heiress. Well, she is a Seagram's heiress, to defend it in the NXIVM sex cult. You know, this is what I'm trying to talk about. I think there's connections behind the curtain with Disney.
Yeah,
and
I would believe that.
Disney and Warner. You know, not just saying these two companies, but I'm talking about all of these corporations that we're talking about in the media industry, entertainment industry, all of them. And then behind the curtains, there's some weirdos, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, behind the curtains, I mean, in front of the curtain, it's, hey, we got a nice movie coming out, Wonder Woman, blah, blah, blah. We got, you know, Thanos and Avengers. But behind the curtain, it's some fucked up shit going on, right? And behind the curtain is where they say, that Zack Snyder guy, he's just not good for business. And they shake hands and they go back to doing whatever the crazy shit they were doing behind the curtains. But in front of the curtain, they say, oh, family, and we just got to go continue doing this movie. You know what I mean? Like, it could be two sides.
That is so dodgy, because that was more than a situation, man.
Right? No. I'm just saying how they portrayed it. You know, like, what did they even say about how they, you know what I mean? They didn't even say why they're gonna, I mean, they portrayed it like, yo, Zack Snyder had to step down. But that was really much it. You know, everybody else had to figure it out from their own self what happened, because they really never told what happened, you know?
No.
They really never.
I mean, it's not like it was supposed to be a secret because we know.
Right. No, I'm just saying it was never spoke about. Like you said last night, no one has ever even said, condolences to the family or anything like that.
Right.
They didn't say condolences to Zack Snyder on her birthday or anything like that. It never came out like that. Only we say happy birthday, or we say, yo, Zack, I'm feeling you, I'm sorry, blah, blah, blah. It's only the fans that say that. But these corporations haven't said that. And Zack Snyder has made billions of dollars for these corporations, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to me, that's shady right there. Like,
that is huge shady.
That's
because they clearly
shady.
Publicly blacklisted him.
Right.
And his family. And it's now starting to feel like they're blacklisting the fans.
Right, but
because they think we stupid.
Who benefited from that? Disney, right.
Because clearly if they wanted to benefit, they would have released the Snyder Cut, logically.
Right.
After, we want to make a business, we want to build on something, we want to try this, There's none of that. Because even we all know that James Wan and Zack Snyder were tight, right? And Jason Momoa says that Aquaman is coming off from the Snyder Cut, from where where Aquaman ended, and he's going to see his father. Right. Hence why he sees the thing. So that fact alone means that Aquaman is a sequel to the Snyder Cut, which means that the theatrical cut is not even canon.
Right.
As is. So, but the fact that they don't even connect the dots, they don't see it. They just did this quick suicide mission, or this. It was more like we're gonna kill your career, Zack Snyder, because they said it was all directed by him. They said he stepped down, but they clearly filmed over the whole film with a totally different film, rushed it, and then there's no condolences, no care. Everything adds up to like blacklisting him for some reason.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. It was like, dog, whenever you see any crazy shit that happens, just look at who benefits from it. Disney is the only one that benefited from it. Disney and Marvel. Warner Brothers didn't benefit because they have the golden ticket. They just haven't put it out. Warner Brothers fans hasn't benefited from it because we're just begging and begging to see the fucking movie. The only ones that benefit from it is Disney and their fans, because they're, reaping $2 billion benefits, and then their fans are thinking, oh, we got the best movies ever, blah, blah, blah. But I would think the ones who benefited are the ones who pulled the trigger, in my opinion.
I would agree. I mean, doing the math, that's what it looks like.
Right.
It's kind of like, okay, you guys stay here. There's a restricted area. What are you guys doing? And then you hear a bomb go off. You're like, oh, that's what you guys are doing. It's like we could see their actions, and I don't know if they think that they're doing it, like, oh, they're distracted with Aquaman. They're not even thinking what we did to Zack Snyder and Justice League. Let's move on. Let's move forward. Let's give them all these distractions.
Right.
Blah, blah. I'm seeing a lot of shadiness, and all these conspiracy theories seem more and more real. And then that one, the benefit thing, now that you say it, feels more legit.
So it's like Disney is running Warner Brothers also.
Yeah, or they cheating by doing that.
A big-ass corporation that we think are Pepsi and Coke, but they're really Pepsi and Pepsi.
Oh, dang, that's crazy. Damn, fuck it. Hey, I just had another thought. It just hit my head, right? This is a huge what if, all right? This is all, since I want to open up Fantasyland here in my conspiracy wonderment and questions, and this is all Warner Brothers' fault. If they want to prove me wrong, release a Snyder Cut, end the deal. So, what if there's a crazy deep dark circle of like an organization, fill in the blank of everything we're thinking about? What if they approached Snyder? They said, hey, we like what you're doing. We want you to join. What do you say? Or whatever. And he's like, no. And they're like, well, no one ever refuses us. We're going to bury you. He's like, I'm sorry, this is not good.
Right.
And maybe that's why they blacklisted him. Maybe not because of his film, because there's all these crazy accusations that don't even make sense. Just hearing the notes of his film, we already love it more than Justice League.
Right.
The theatrical cut.
Correct.
So it can't be that he's a hack. So what if he rejected them of going down the dark path? Maybe he's one of the first or the few or the rare that reject him. And then this is the punishment for it. because I was thinking about the Allison Mack thing, right?
Right.
What if Allison Mack is oh, by the way, if I'm like murdered in the next year or so, you know that I'm right, or this little, not right, but
no,
this
here's what you gotta say. No, here's what you gotta say.
But here's the thing: what if he's the one that said no? Because I don't know how Allison Mack was caught from her cult. Like, how does that shit get out?
Right.
Because I can only try and wonder at, because I don't know these worlds. I don't know these people. These are all assumptions. These are all imagination. This is all guessing.
Right.
But, you know I'm familiar with some of the gang life out here. I'm not never been a gang member, but a lot of my close friends were ex-gang members, and some of our students, when I was teaching dance, we were trying to keep them off the streets, out of trouble.
Right.
And some of our kids did get in trouble, and the whole story there.
Right.
So one thing I know about some of the gangs out here is that if someone wants to leave, right, a lot of them can only leave 3 ways. 1, you gotta go to jail for somebody.
Right.
2, you gotta kill somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Or 3, you gotta endure a beatdown.
Right.
And people can beat you down using whatever weapons they stop when they feel like it.
Right.
And chances of your survival, man, you're probably going to be a paraplegic, or you're going to not have any brain conductivity going on, and you're just a vegetable the rest of your life.
Right. Blood in, blood out. So
stuff like that, the kind of cruelty of humanity laws over there and such violence. Now take it to such a negative group. What if they have their own methods of punishment for people who reject them?
Right, I get you, but
so that's a theory. That's what I'm thinking about just now. I just want to voice my thought process. I obviously need to meditate more on it, or just
I get that. Check this out. I get that, but he was catching hell during Sucker Punch. That's way before the DCEU, right?
Yeah, I mean that could be an internal struggle where they're trying to control him or something too.
Right. See, I like what you're saying. I do like what you're saying. Now, check this out.
This is all theories, dog.
No.
The midi-chlorians in my toe.
Hey, so you don't do any drugs and you're not going to commit suicide. So we're just going to throw that out. So if it comes out, blah, 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 it was on Go Deep that it didn't happen like that. So what we're saying...
All right, now I'm scared. All right, I'm going to talk to you later. Bye.
All right, so check this out. If we really like want to get deep, right? Now, so there's like some ties between Walt Disney and Nazis, right? But there's some ties between a lot of people in Hollywood and Nazis. So when the Nazis came over, they've been doing stuff like they were in a bunch of like these weird churches. A lot of weird churches that's been investigated by the FBI. A lot of weird stuff that's been even connected to the JFK assassination, right? And a lot of weird church cults that's been connected to JPL and Jack Parsons and, Werner von Braun and all of this other shit like that. And it's all tied to like Nazis who think they found supernatural ghosts in space like that. So, they kind of put their whole energy into space travel and harnessing, nuclear power to get up in space, all this propulsion shit like that. But they also want to change the world, and they do it through these like weird cults. Maybe I can put this nice little video in after we finish talking. It might be another long ass podcast, but I think what you were saying is true. But I think think about like Allison Mack. She was just an actress, right? She wasn't Zack Snyder level, but she was...
No, she was working her way up. She was also running the show on Smallville. She became a producer, and I think she did some writing too. She even directed some episodes. Tom Welling did as well, but her more so.
Oh, wow.
So she was...
Really?
Yeah. If you watch the show, watch the credits, watch the behind the scenes, she's a smart girl, and she's been moving up more than an actress.
Wow. So you think she was on Zack Snyder's level? As in
Well, as far as a filmmaker goes, status wise, I would say yes, in the sense that she knows how to direct, she knows how to tell a story, and she knows how to produce a project. You know,
right.
for me, those are the key elements of just being a filmmaker. Like, you can help make a film, do one part, but if you're doing multiple hats like that, I would say you're at not. I wouldn't say Zach's level artistically, but status wise, as far as being a whole around filmmaker, I would say yeah.
So they seem pretty
If
similar.
that makes sense.
So Allison Mack and Zack Snyder have seen pretty much the same stuff behind closed doors.
Possibly, because she was in the TV department though, and he was in the film department though. But I don't know.
No,
Again,
I mean,
these are all assumptions. I don't know which circles are close, which ones are separate.
Right. Hold on a second. My mom's calling. Hold on. Yeah, she is. She's straight.
Hey, that's good. That's good.
All right. So what I was saying is, Allison Mack and Zack Snyder behind the scenes have probably witnessed the same people.
Possibly.
So I think you're probably right. Zach probably said.
It's an assumption.
No.
I don't want to make absolute decisions without evidence. You know what I'm saying?
Right. No,
it's just the gut.
But yeah, you're right. This whole show is an assumption show. This is fucking.
Yeah. No, I just want to put that disclaimer out there. You know, I don't want people writing notes on their arm, going, "Oh shit, the truth," and whatever crazy shit.
Yeah. So no, I get it. And it's just wow, Hollywood is just crazy, man. But big ups to Zach for telling them no, fuck them.
No, that's what I feel, because he's clearly. And okay, this is a fact feeling midichlorian in my toes saying, right? And I feel that it's pretty obvious that he's being punished. And because the whole thing of being blacklisted, right? Even in the small productions I was in, my bosses would blacklist certain actors. I'm like, hell no. And then share that amongst other people that they know. So in that circle, that person will never get a job again. Right. Now, seeing the tiny shit that I saw, and I thought all this stuff was petty because I was at a low level, right? Mm-hmm. I thought that, okay, the goal is to get out of this. And then when I get to the top in Hollywood, everyone's going to be professional, focused, passionate, work together, make something beautiful, da-da-da-da-da. But then, unfortunately, reality sets in, and you go, dang, this is the world of BVS. We're trying to find the light in it, Right. So, seeing kind of like the ripples of the furthest ripple of the truth, all these actions and things happening to Zach, it looks like he's been blacklisted for petty reasons, and then he and the fans are suffering, and their company is suffering too, and they don't understand.
Right.
I really feel like he's been like corporately blacklisted, maybe, and that's fucked up.
So why do you think Netflix will pick him up?
Because I think Netflix, like YouTube, Vimeo, other streaming services, they are their own circle. They have nothing to do with really Hollywood and stuff. Because there's a lot of stuff streaming wise, and before I got this job, I was offered another job, which is to work at a porn site. And my job would be to watch other people's streams of whatever actions they're doing interactive and make sure they are not breaking the law. And then I have to take note of it. And I was like, oh, really? He's like, yeah, there's certain things by country law, California state law that people cannot do. And we have to make sure that no one's injuring themselves. Otherwise, the company is no more. And you have to take note of everything, of everyone's personal stuff, because every now and then the CIA comes to us when they're looking for someone, and we have to give them our full report and stuff. I was like, dang, wow, I didn't know. Really? So there's more circles going up, and then streaming services, I think, is going to be like its new platform. And we see like, okay, maybe they're going to cancel the DC Universe app because they want to force everyone to go to HBO Max, and then they're pulling shit from Netflix. Netflix used to have everything under the sun, and people are like, yeah, that's cute, right?
Right.
And then, because before Netflix, they were mailing DVDs to your house, You could watch it and you put it in a bag and put it out. And they're like, hey, well, we could just do a digital thing.
Right.
And because I think what they were doing is every DVD they recorded digitally, and they got the rights to record digitally, so they can maybe if they lost access to that film and people are like, oh man, everyone's renting this film, oh no, we need 200 more, let's make 200 more discs, you know. And then by recording digitally all that, this is just my guess, they're like, hey, why don't we just stream this? It's easier and people can get their movies faster.
Right.
So it was a thing. It looks like an idea that happened organically. And when things happen organically and are a success, the big wig studio people are like, whoa, this is where the money's going? I want a little bit of that. Ha, ha, ha.
Right.
So they probably take the rights out and they go, hey, come to our one. So maybe we have to go to like one for Paramount Pictures in the future, or this for that one in the future. And then it's just going to be our whole cable bill all over again. But
so what, should we just give up?
I think it's just a new circle going up, that the bigger circles are trying to catch on. Because I said that that a lot of the studios were looking down on Netflix. Mm-hmm. So if they're looking down on Netflix at that time, that's telling me that, you know, streaming services are a different ballgame, a different, you know, like, okay, maybe Hollywood's the NFL, and then, you know, Netflix is the MLB or something, you know? Mm-hmm. It's like a different game plan, game platform or something.
Should we just say...
So if they take over,
right?
Because then if I'm right with all that, if all these assumptions are right, Netflix has not blacklisted Zack Snyder, so bring him over there.
So should we just say fuck WB and just give up and just go watch Army of the Dead?
I don't want to say give up, no. Because I feel like that's unfair to the good people because I feel like it is that thing. I feel, and this is the midichlorians in my left toe, I feel that we have allies, but they're not the leaders. The bad guys are the leaders, but there's good people there who want the cut or whatever, but they just can't say shit. Case in point, Jason Momoa, when he said, thing sucks about our business is you can't really speak your mind. There's probably a bunch of people like him too. I wouldn't doubt it.
Right. I believe that.
They're just, you know, so if we, see, it's hard. Like, I'm still trying to struggle with boycotting whatever, but at the same time, if there's like a different group that's like, you know, all good people and they made a really good film, it just happened to be under their studio, I want them to do well, so maybe there can be change. But at the same time, you don't want to encourage the infectious machine. So I think it's like it's the lady justice, you know, it's blindfold. You just got to weigh it and go with your gut. I think at this point, if someone feels like they want to boycott it because they don't feel right, by all means, go for it. If some people have hope, they still want to stick to some of the comic books or movie or something, then go for that. I mean, you could do whatever you want. I say, I don't think it's fair to boycott it, because besides, we're also the Rebel Alliance.
Right.
Would we make a dent? Also, that's where I think like we should put our energy into trying to bring more knowledge and awareness. Right. And who knows, maybe when people know the truth and then the story continues to bring awareness, maybe at one point people are going to go, dang, I understand film now. I saw a lot of Marvel and a lot of DC. Now I see everything's cool. The truth is coming out. Because now there's not much of a DC versus Marvel as much as it was like 2 years ago.
Right.
I think it was vicious 2 years ago. It's kind of getting more civil, more appreciative, and people are hanging out again. You know, it's really cool. And that's where I think Warner Bros. Should have stuck to their guns, because then they would have established a strong, cohesive storyline that, you know, people are like, oh, wow, Endgame. Thank you. That was great. Oh, let's take a look at DC just to change it up. Oh, that was good too. I'm going to go back to Marvel. But hey, good job, DC. You know, it'll be positive like that. People don't invest in that because, I don't know, there's more fast money in negativity, but there's longer longevity of riches with positivity, because that's more of a healthy garden to grow, you know? And I think that would always just build a big empire like Disney. They started off with good, beautiful stuff, and that's how they became so huge that they are. So anyways, Fuck, I forgot my train of thought.
But not if they're the evil empire, then they did some other shit going on.
Oh yeah. So I think our strongest point is to have all the people knowledgeable and they can make the choice for themselves to go, okay, you know, I'm with you guys, I support it. Hopefully we'll see it. And then eventually a lot of people are gonna say enough's enough. Like that one dude at Comic-Con, he came up to me, my back was turned, he's like, yo man, Snarka, that's what's up. I was like, for real? That's the one I got on video. He's like, yeah. Because even when I stopped recording, he kept talking about how dope Zack Snyder's movies are, how detailed, how passionate, and there's a personality. And then, you know, especially with the action, there's such a story going on with the action and fine, crisp details in it. Like that flash when he zipped around to get the parademon leaving the shots. If you watch that slow, there's so much movement that Ezra Miller is doing that Zack had him do or whatever. And it happens so seamlessly and fast where it looks like he's teleporting. That's so cool. And we would have seen more of that action too. And he could tell just on the action that it was fucked with already. You know, and he's not even a fan. He doesn't know much. I mean, well, he's passionate about the movie, but you know, people know. And then if enough people know, if enough people see how cruel things are being practiced and how much biased propaganda is being done to someone undeserving. I mean, granted, you could like his movies, not whatever, but that's a human being who worked his ass off to do the best he could. And it profited a whole company and gave jobs and careers to a lot of people. And then he's being punished. And guess what? We're being punished too. And some people who wanted more, who didn't get more, who got, you know, treated like they were stupid by seeing that damn movie, they're insulted too.
Right.
So it's just a bunch of bad stuff. And the more people realize that, I mean, because if this goes undone, it's just going to happen again. And people are going to be treated like idiots by the studios. And that's like an insult, you know?
It's this evil empire, bro. Evil empire. This is not random. Yeah. This is not random.
No, it's like, yeah, it's like, oh, because I love film, man. It was my dream. And I'm disappointed that the land of movie opportunity I thought I wanted to go to is not the land that welcomes goodness at the moment.
Yep. Well,
and that bothers me. So then, I'm like, I'll take it to streaming services. You know, I'll focus on the people.
You said it, Bo. Well, I'm gonna wrap this one up right now, Bo, because I want to put in a video, and we're already at like 1 hour and 30. So if I put in a video, it's probably gonna wrap it up to over 2 hours again. So.
All right, cool. I hope this is good. I feel like I can't say anymore, so I think we finished whatever we were trying to do last one. But, you know, I'm pretty sure something else will come up again.
No, you did good. You always do good. Every time you say you don't like it, it turns out to be a good show.
I think it's because at the very end, because I'm at the same position, my mind is just racing. I'm like, where is the truth? Which one is the truth? Which one is it? You know, maybe we're like Doctor Strange looking at all these portals and we're like, which is the right one? No.
That could be it. That could be it. But I'm going to stick on the evil empire for a little while. I'm going to put these videos in.
No, I'm leaning more towards the evil empire because that's what it feels. And especially with Disney, you know? I mean, you take in your mind, just take the Death Star, put it in the top right corner of your mind. Take the Death Star 2 from Return of the Jedi, put it in the left top corner of your mind. And take the big, Star Killer, put that big one in the middle bottom, and it creates a Mickey Mouse symbol. And they're all evil big planet killers. That's just funny.
Damn right. And they're connected with WB too. I have no doubt about it. I think they're working together, and I think we just think they're two separate companies, but their actions don't speak of it lately.
I know, because these are all speculations, and, you know, if they don't release it, they're going to encourage more of this dark truths, you know, and I'm just going to drop the towel there and be like, I'm done. I can't think anymore.
You mean drop the mic, it's not drop the towel.
Nah, there's probably going to be more rounds, man.
You know, Jeff Purdy's going to come up with a gay joke after that.
Hey, you know, wherever his mind is, it must be very happy and a lot of dudes. I love you, Jeff.
All right, dog. Give a shout out. We're going to wrap it up.
All right. I actually planned this one this time.
All right.
My shout out is to all the dudes who are working on that. Oh, freaking phone, open up. There's a lock.
Uh-oh.
Oh, here we go. So yeah, these are the dudes. I promise to give them a shout out because they're working hard on this Justice League film. Actually, the artist is. So I'm just gonna give my see from the Instagram, so you can look them up if you guys want. But underscore Moyes underscore Udin underscore Ahmad Moyes. He's the director. Wonderful artist. He's doing it. Bilal Shadani. DCEU underscore forever. Dawson Dupree, David Hawk, John Salandria, we know him. That's our boy too.
Yep.
Vitor Oliveira, Kratos, the DC character, Alessandro Bussi, Harrison Morrison, and DCEU Appreciation under Snyder Cut 2019. And your boy Kojay, we are the group that's working on the animated films. So big shout out to those guys. Word. Keep the love alive, and it's going to be a beautiful thing when that releases.
Appreciate it, bro. Shouts out, double shout out to Salandria. That's my homie.
Yeah, that guy's amazing. He's cool.
Hell yeah. All right, bro. So I'm going to edit this one up tonight, and I'll have something before you go out to Sri Lanka tomorrow.
I have internet. I look forward to hearing it, brother. Thank you.
All right, man. So I'll talk to you later.
I have released the Snyder Cut.
Peace.
Wait.
Some things of which you're probably already very familiar, and yet in a different way perhaps than you're used to thinking about it. So don't be dismayed if at the beginning this does not seem relevant, because I will show you how and why it is. A seminal event for me in the secret space program began in June of 1947. No, I wasn't around in June of 1947, but historically it was a seminal event. And many of you have heard of the Maury Island affair, a very strange, bizarre incident that took place on the Pacific Northwest of the United States. Shortly after Kenneth Arnold, a pilot, gave us the term flying saucer that month, there was a UFO sighting. In this sighting, UFOs evidently crashed, rained debris down upon some civilians, killed a dog, according to the story, wounded a child, according to the story. And it led to a chain of events that are very, very unusual, and yet are evidence of something that took place 20 years later that shows us there was a deep connection between the UFO story as it was promulgated back in the 1940s and very serious political and military events of the next 20, 30 years. So, Maury Island affair, there's a UFO sighting shortly after Kenneth Arnold gave us the famous flying saucer story. And a man that we know as Fred Krisman claimed that he had been involved in that incident. He claimed that people had been hurt, that he had pieces of the UFO. And what happened was, individuals of the United States Army Air Force at the time visited Krisman and his partner, Mr. Dahl, and retrieved pieces of this so-called debris of the UFO. They got on a plane, the plane crashed, and both of these Air Force officers died. These are probably the first two victims, mortalities associated with the UFO phenomenon. The first two, there were many more since then, as any student of UFO history knows. So Fred Krisman is this strange guy, strange background. No one knows too much about him. He seems to have been some kind of confidence man, some kind of criminal, a crook, but maybe also an intelligence agent. There is evidence that there were intelligence connections to his background. He was also somebody I like to call a wandering bishop, and I'll get to that story in a minute, because this is a striking aspect of this whole field that people have not covered because they don't understand it. Fred Krisman, 1947, seminal event in UFO history. He shows up again 20 years later, being investigated by District Attorney Jim Garrison in New Orleans because of his alleged role in the Kennedy assassination. We'll come back to that in a minute. One of the people investigating the Maury Island affair, and all of the UFO incidents that were taking place in the Pacific Northwest in 1947, in the months before and after the famous Roswell crash, was this man, FBI Special Agent in Charge, stationed in Butte, Montana. He was in charge of a bunch of files we call the SM-X files. According to the FBI's own documentation, UFO matters were classified as SM-X, Security Matter-X. These were the original X files. This man's name is Guy Bannister. Guy Bannister is a man who will come up again in our discussion 20 years later as a suspect in the Kennedy assassination. If you saw the movie JFK by Oliver Stone, this was Guy Bannister, the actor playing Guy Bannister. Now we come to another man called Jack Martin. Jack Martin's real name is Edward Suggs. He worked as an investigator for Guy Bannister. He was another bishop. We'll get to that story in a bit. He's probably the same guy as the name that comes up in the files of the Office of Special Investigations of the military as Agent Jack S. Martin, who was investigating UFO incidents in California in 1949. In the movie JFK by Oliver Stone, Jack Lemmon plays Jack Martin. I'm showing you these photographs from the film so you get a kind of context. If you've seen the film, you know that we're talking about real people, real individuals, and their real influence. Of course, Oliver Stone does not go into the UFO aspect of this case. These photographs have never been seen before in public. You're the first people in the entire world that is actually seeing these photographs because they're photographs that were given to me personally by a man who was involved with Jack Martin. Jack Martin, the Jack Lemmon character in JFK, the man involved, they say, in the Kennedy conspiracy in New Orleans, was also, in addition to being an investigator, in addition to being possibly a man investigating UFO incidents in California, in addition to being heavily involved in the group around Lee Harvey Oswald in New Orleans in 1963, was also a bishop in a church, in a weird church, in a church that no one had ever heard of before, in a church that even Jim Garrison didn't understand. In his own documentation, in his own writings, going back to the House Select Subcommittee on Assassinations when the United States government was going through an investigation of the assassinations in the 1970s, Jim Garrison wrote a note, copies of which I have, saying, look into this church stuff because I don't understand it. Well, there's Jack Martin dressed as a priest in the 1970s after the Kennedy assassination. His friend and associate was David Ferry. David Ferry and Jack Martin both worked for Guy Bannister. David Ferry, former Eastern Airlines pilot, rabid anti-communist, very much involved in anti-communist activities. He is another bishop of the same church as Jack Martin. And of course, he knew Lee Harvey Oswald, as we know, in the Civil Air Patrol. In the movie, that was David Ferry, unforgettable guy in a fake wig and fake eyebrows, talking about enigmas wrapped in mysteries, wrapped in puzzles, wrapped in all kinds of things. So this is the David Ferry character that made famous in the film. And this is an actual photograph of David Ferry dressed again as a priest, as Jack Martin was. We have co-conspirators in the Kennedy assassination, as we will see, ties back to the UFO and the space program, who were involved in a strange church, a church that didn't really exist except on paper. And this is the church, the American Orthodox Catholic Church. If you review the FBI files, all of the investigations that were undertaken for the Warren Commission, and later by the House Subcommittee in the 1970s, this name will keep coming up, and no one does any background check on it. No one goes any further. Members of this church included a man called Profeta, we'll get to him in a second, David Ferry, Jack Martin, a man called Carl Stanley, who was mentioned in the FBI files, Tommy Jude Baumler, Thomas Beckham. These are all names familiar to researchers in the Kennedy assassination. They were all members of this church, most of whom were bishops in the church. The church had a lot of bishops, not many priests, and no congregations. Seriously. Just bishops, no priests, no congregations. Rarely did they have a building. This photograph was taken in the only building I ever knew that housed the American Orthodox Catholic Church in the Bronx, where I'm from. And I knew the church personally. I knew these individuals personally. I knew this guy right here. That's Profeta, the guy who created the church. I knew him. And I was a member briefly of this group because I lived practically next door. And it's a long story. I won't get into it now. I won't bore you with it. But the other names on this list are extremely important. Ferry Martin, we already know, involved in the Kennedy assassination conspiracy, at least according to Jim Garrison. Tommy Jude Baumler was a lawyer in New Orleans. And his claim to fame, as we found out only about a year ago, was that he was the man who incorporated another church, this one called the Process Church of the Final Resurrection, of the Final Judgment, rather, Process Church of the Final Judgment. This was the group that was implicated, rightly or wrongly, in the Charles Manson family, in possibly the Bobby Kennedy assassination. It goes on and on. There are all these churches that swim underneath the radar that have connections to intelligence agencies, the military, and as we will see, to the space program. This was Profeta. I knew this guy personally, a Ukrainian Orthodox priest who left the Ukrainian Orthodox Church to create this church of his own, the American Orthodox Catholic Church. He was picked by Thomas Dewey as the White House chaplain. There was an election between Harry Truman and Thomas Dewey. Everyone thought Dewey would win. Dewey was the Republican. Truman was the Democrat. Truman won by a narrow margin. And Profeta once showed me the letter that he got from Thomas Dewey appointing him as White House chaplain when Dewey thought he had won the election. This is how politically prominent and important he was. On the board of directors of the American Orthodox Catholic Church was J. Edgar Hoover, the head of the Federal Bureau of Investigation of the FBI, the man who gave us the X-Files and Guy Bannister and all the rest. J. Edgar Hoover was a member and on the board of directors of this phony church. Another member was Christopher Maria Stanley. He's now known as Saint Christopher Stanley. He was canonized by the guy who took over when he died. Close associate of all these guys. Ferry Martin tried to implicate him in the Kennedy assassination. He tried to implicate them in the Kennedy assassination. When Profeta had created the American Orthodox Catholic Church, he summoned all the other bishops who had been bishops with him in this church to go to New York and present their bona fides, their bona fides, their credentials to him and to Hoover. The only one who obeyed this was Carl Stanley, Christopher Maria Stanley. Christopher Stanley goes to New York. He goes to Profeta. He signs on. He goes back to his home in Kentucky. He's dead less than a month later. And only 2 weeks after the death of David Ferry, the mysterious death of David Ferry, another bishop in the same church. Suddenly, the bishops of this church were all being killed. They were all dying under mysterious circumstances, all within a few weeks of each other. This story you have not heard before, because no one knows what to do with the material. No one knows what to do with this information. So when it comes to churches and guys in funny hats, you know, there is some degree of mystery out there and confusion. This is the organization as I, over the years, uncovered it, starting with our friend Profeta over there, to Christopher Stanley, to David Ferry, to Jack Martin. These were all guys implicated in the Kennedy assassination, and they all wore funny hats. The connection was this, another funny hat, that's J. Edgar Hoover in his Masonic Shriner fez, because he was a Freemason, as I think we all know. So there's J. Edgar Hoover, to Guy Bannister, the guy who investigated the UFOs in 1947, the guy who was writing up all these telexes and letters headlined SM-X file, UFO sighting here, UFO sighting there. Down here is Fred Krisman. He was the guy that Bannister was allegedly investigating. And next to Krisman, there's Profeta again. Profeta, who was on the same board of directors of a church as J. Edgar Hoover. All these people working in concert, all these people working together, a phony church, mysterious goings-on, and really weird hats. So what does all this have to do with the space program? You're sitting there thinking, okay, this is all very strange, but what are we here for? Well, let's fall back a little bit. We'll start to see the threads come together. In the United States, the space race began on Halloween 1936. And you're looking at this charming group of individuals down there relaxing in front of a rocket. These were America's first rocket scientists. People like Jack Parsons, Theodore von Karman, and this is the launch at Arroyo Seco in California on October 31st, 1936. The very first launching of a rocket by American space engineers. Jack Parsons has a crater on the moon named after him. Jack Parsons was a co-founder of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, JPL, at Caltech in California. When you watch the space shuttle launches or you read anything about it, you'll always come across JPL all the time. He was a co-founder of JPL. Crater on the moon named after him. Solved a lot of issues regarding solid fuel storage of rocket material. And at the same time, he was a follower of Aleister Crowley, the Aleister Crowley, the infamous magician who created his own cult, his own religion. Parsons himself, at the same time he's working on rockets for the US military, he's also conducting rituals in the desert trying to summon angels and demons. I'm not making this stuff up, in case you're wondering. One of his co-workers, one of his partners in his ritual working, his ritual magic, was L. Ron Hubbard, the man who later went on to found Scientology. Hubbard stole Jack Parsons' money, stole Jack Parsons' girlfriend, ran to Miami and bought a boat. In later years, Hubbard would speak very fondly of Aleister Crowley, claiming he had met him. He never did. Crowley died in 1947, before Hubbard had even actually heard of him. But Parsons was investigated by the FBI as a security risk because he was involved in occult workings. But at the same time, Parsons is a brilliant scientist. Well, just as he's getting ready to leave the United States through all the pressure of the FBI investigations, there's a mysterious explosion at his home. He dies under very mysterious circumstances. The house literally blows up with him in it. Theodore von Karman was the leader of the group that founded the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. He has a crater on the moon named after him. Born in Hungary, studied in Germany. He was a brilliant rocket scientist as well. And he formed the Jet Propulsion Laboratory with a couple of other people, Frank Molina and, of course, Parsons, Ed Foreman, and a Chinese scientist, another brilliant man called Qian Suisun. Qian Suisun goes on to later fame in another area of rocket science and space science. So von Karman was a guy shown here, by the way, with a Nazi scientist down here. This is Qian up here, and this is von Karman. This scientist, von Karman had known before in Germany and was instrumental in getting him to come to the United States to work on the space program with him. Qian was the man they sent to debrief Wernher von Braun. Wernher von Braun, of course, was the Nazi scientist that was brought to the United States under something called paperclip. Wernher von Braun we'll get into in more detail just in a few minutes. But Qian was also investigated by the FBI. Everybody involved in the rocket program in the United States in the 1930s and 1940s wound up being investigated by the FBI for one reason or another. He eventually got so sick and tired, he defected to China after all of the harassment he had been undergoing by the FBI. And what happened? He develops China's space program. He creates the Silkworm missile that was used to such effect during the first Iraq invasion. When Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait and all of that, he was sending Scud missiles and all of this. The silkworms were in use there in the Middle East. So Qian, starting as a patriotic American citizen helping with the space program, through all the suppression by FBI, all the harassment, gives up, basically, goes back to China, and becomes a hero in China, develops, jumpstarts the Chinese space program. When we're talking today about the space race and the space programs, as we'll be getting into with the other speakers, keep in mind the fact that it began in two important places. It began in Germany with the rocket systems and the rocket development in Germany at Peenemünde, Nordhausen, which we'll get into in a second. But it also started in the United States. And the reason that China is launching rockets today and launching satellites is because of this man, who could have been part of our space program for the rest of his life, and instead, because of all sorts of political nonsense, wound up going to China and giving them a space program almost complete. At the same time in Germany, in the same year, almost the same month, 1936, we have Fritz Goslau of the Argus company. He begins work on remote-controlled aircraft. And a few years later, December of 1942, we have the first launch, successful launch of the V1. If you've been following History Channel stuff about World War II and the Blitz and all of that, you'll know about the V1s and the devastating effect that they had. This is a picture of the V1 at the time, and this is another one. Later termed the world's first cruise missile. These were launched from aircraft, dropped, the V1 would drop from a plane and then go on its way. Aimed at London, of course, and later, as we know, at Antwerp. Devastating weapon, resulting in almost 23,000 civilian deaths at the time. But at the same time, back in 1941, we have the first jet-assisted takeoff launch in California by the von Karman group. Jack Parsons is here. We have Jack Parsons right here watching the takeoff of the first jet-assisted takeoff plane, a jet-powered plane. So here we have the rocket scientist who's also an occultist and the follower of Aleister Crowley and a member of all kinds of other occult organizations involved in these important events of the rocket program. In 1944, of course, we have the V2. The Germans launched the V2. Actually, more people were killed making the V2 than were killed by the V2 because of slave labor in Germany and because of the concentration camp labor that was brought to Nordhausen and later to Mittelbau-Dora concentration camps and the factories attached to Buchenwald. More people were actually killed making these V2s than were actually killed in suffering under them. So the Nazi rocket program, as we know it, started at Peenemünde, was later relocated, and the person in charge of this was General Walter Dornberger, and his assistant was Werner von Braun. We'll get back to them in a second. Another important personality in aviation medicine this time was Dr. Hubertus Struckhold. He's a man in charge of all sorts of horrendous experiments on living persons in the camps, and yet is considered the father of aviation medicine. He was brought to the United States. He was given his own institute at Randolph Air Force Base in Texas, and they had a building named after him until the local Daughters of the American Revolution decided that having a building named after this guy was probably not the best message to send to our next generations of young people studying medicine, so they took the name off. People were aware that Struckhold was basically a monster. We've all heard of Operation Paperclip, I think. Started as Operation Crossbow, Operation Overcast. The British were trying to get the scientists. Russians were trying to get Nazi scientists. And the Americans had their own program, which they then later renamed as Paperclip. It wasn't just the men, the scientists they were bringing over. It was also their documentation. It was also as much machinery as they could possibly get. We are talking about hundreds of railroad cars, freight cars filled with documents and equipment and machinery. Not talking even about the hundreds at first, and then thousands of Nazi scientists that were brought to the United States. Here's a photograph of the team at Fort Bliss, Texas, Paperclip members. That's a hell of a lot of Nazi scientists. And not a single funny hat among them, I will point out. One thing it's important to remember about the space program in the United States, until 1957, it was not a civilian program. For the first 10 years, or 15 years of its existence, it was a military program. There was no NASA. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration had not been created yet. So all of these people worked for the military. The rocket program was a military program. And you have to remember that's the origins of the space program, was with the Army, which later became the Army Air Force, which later became NASA. The space program went under NASA. These were supposed to be our Nazis, right? We were sold a bill of goods. The United States was told us, oh, these people are not really Nazis. They were Germans. They were scientists. They were helping out. They were working for us. They really weren't believers. Yeah, right. Why then, if this is so, did we bring the best and the brightest to the United States, give them whatever they wanted, all the resources that they wanted, whatever they needed, whatever they asked for? And the Soviet Union was the first country to launch a satellite into space. if they were really working for the United States and they had become born-again American patriots and card-carrying Republicans, yes, Republicans, how did it happen that we didn't get a rocket into space, we didn't get a satellite into space, that the Russians were the first? Well, what happened? Weren't they sabotaging our space program since the very beginning? These are the true believers. This is just a handful of the people you'll come across when you research this. Walter Dornberger later becomes the head of NASA, later gets a board position with Bell Aerospace in the United States, is considered a rabid Nazi by military intelligence officials who are doing background checks in Germany. They've got witness statements, they've got documents, they've got everything they need to put Dornberger in jail for the rest of his life. Those documents are buried. Wernher von Braun was an SS major. There are photographs of Wernher von Braun in an SS uniform. The SS was not the Rotary. It was not the Boy Scouts. You didn't just, kind of join the SS because it would further your career. No, that didn't work that way. In order to join the SS, you had to prove your racial purity, going back to the year 1750. There had to be no Untermenschen in your background, right? No Jews, no Gypsies, no Slavs, no Democrats. Nobody like that in the background of your racial purity. You had to prove this, and you had to maintain a certain degree of involvement with the SS all the time. The SS was a pagan cult. The SS forbade mention of Christian holidays even in their documentation. The SS was extremely pagan, was extremely anti-Christian, anti-Jewish, anti-everything else. If you had a rank of major in the SS, you did not get that automatically. You got that because you proved yourself. And Wernher von Braun was proven later to have been involved in meetings discussing slave labor requirements for the rocket systems at Peenemünde and also at Mittelbau. He was involved in these discussions. He knew about the killings of prisoners, the torture of prisoners. He was involved in all of that. It didn't matter to Wernher von Braun. At the same time that he's working for us, we bring him over under paperclip. He's now in the United States. What is he doing? He's sending classified materials out of the country to his comrades back in Germany. We know this. It's part of the documentation. It's part of the record now. These files have been declassified. Wernher von Braun was working against the United States almost from the beginning. This is a scandal, But yet we consider him the father of the American space program. I mean, he's the one who got us to the moon, right? Kurt Debus was the first director of the Kennedy Space Center, the first director of the Kennedy Space Center at Cape Canaveral in Florida. He was a member of the SS and the SA, the Sturmabteilung, right, the brown shirts, the stormtroopers, two other Nazi organizations. This is the man who turned in his friends and co-workers to the Gestapo if they made disloyal remarks. This was a true believer, once again. As I say, he was an SS officer. The Allies considered the SS a criminal organization for very good reason. And yet, we put this guy in charge of the Kennedy Space Center. Theodor Zobel, another scientist, performed experiments on prisoners in the wind tunnel experiments. We brought him over. He worked for us. Hubertus Strughold, as I mentioned, tortured prisoners, killed people just for experiments, dumped them into freezing cold water to see how long they would survive. Stuff like that. Jumpstarts the Aviation Medicine Institute at Randolph Air Force Base. George Rickey, very famous Nazi, murdered prisoners personally murdered them at the Mittelbau-Dora site, right? Is given positions with American corporations in the United States. Emil Salmon worked as an engineer at Wright-Patterson, as you can see. He torched a synagogue. Heinz Gesicke, rocket engineer. His family in the United States during the war was spying for the Nazis. He was fine. He was okay. Denazified. Otto Ambros. We've all heard of Otto Ambros, probably. Executive at IG Farben. This is the guy involved in administering the experiments in Zyklon B, the gas that was used in the death camps. He gets a job with W.R. Grayson Company. Leonard Alberts gets a job with the Bechtel Corporation. All big American corporations, all very important members of the military industrial complex. His co-workers hated him, that he was just too Nazi even for them, and some of them were Nazis. Didn't hurt him at all. They moved him from position to position, but they kept him on. In May 29th, 1947, to give you an idea of how badly the Nazi paperclip scientists were sabotaging the American space program, the United States attacked Mexico with a missile. A missile, this one, the Hermes missile, based on the V-2 design, was launched by German scientists at White Sands Proving Ground in New Mexico. It went up, and then it took a right. And it wound up in Juarez, Mexico, just outside of a heavy populated area. Hit the ground, blew a crater 50 meters across. We actually bombed Mexico with a missile in 1947. The Mexican government was not amused. You know, it's like, you know, we have people going across the border this way, you're sending missiles this way, what's up? Well, the Germans in charge of this had sabotaged the guidance system so that it wouldn't go where it was supposed to go. And the American engineers who were responsible for some of these experiments were complaining like mad to the Pentagon, saying that these guys are nuts. You know, they're doing all kinds of crazy stuff. They are not really on our side. Well, we're going to now move into another area. But just for a second, we think about this situation, this scenario. We had German scientists working for us, stationed at military bases in the United States, who were totally unmonitored. They could leave the base at any time. They would go walking through town. They opened up mailboxes. They were receiving mail from Europe. They were sending mail out to Europe. A lot of it went to Eastern Europe because they had colleagues who had been taken by the Soviets in order to help their German scientists, Nazi scientist colleagues in the Soviet Union and in the Eastern Bloc. They were sending American blueprints over to Eastern Germany, to East Germany and to Russia. At the same time, they're working in the United States. These records have since been declassified, not all of them. I mean, God forbid we should declassify records that are 60 years old from World War II, right? You know, you're wondering right now, is there a secret space program? Well, there was a secret space program in the 1940s for sure. There was a secret space program in the 1950s. We didn't know what was going on. As an American growing up with the threat constantly of the atomic bomb, and, you know, the Russians were going to bomb us and we were all going to die. And I had to hide my head under a desk because that would save me. Growing up with this, we thought that Werner von Braun was a good German. He was not a Nazi. He was on our side. Later, only in the last few years, have we been able to find out that these guys had never been really on our side. They were true believers in their cause. The Nazi Party was not just a political party. You know, it was not Republicans and Democrats, or like we have in the States. It was not people concerned about if we're going to have an ordinance for running a cable line or water or sewer. They cared nothing about that. The Nazi Party was a cult of true believers. Just because they lost the war doesn't mean they lost their true faith. So they maintained it through thick and thin. They looked down on their captors in the United States. To them, it was a toss-up. Do we go to Russia? Do we go to the United States? There was no ideological choice being made. It was strictly a pragmatic one. Where are we going to get the best deal? You know, they were operating on their own. They were operating with their own agenda. So in 1947, we have the Cold War. First, we bombed Mexico, and we apologize for that later. Then we have the Kenneth Arnold sighting. We have the Maury Island affair. We have famously Roswell. In 1947, that same year, the CIA is created. The Department of the Air Force is created. A year later, Truman defeats Dewey. I mention this because of the relationship to the other incidents that we're talking about. In 1950, the Korea War begins. Okay, so now we're in Cold War mode. Russians have poured across the border into North Korea. Okay, the brainwashing thing starts. Everybody's freaking out about the weird science that the Russians are using to brainwash American soldiers. Okay, a person very involved in this, and all the hysteria around this, in 1952, holds a seance in a farmhouse in Maine. The man is, no, not the Pope, not the funny hat guy, the other guy, Andrija Puharich. Andrija Puharich was a medical doctor, he was an inventor, he was a military man, a captain in the army, stationed at Camp Detrick, later Fort Detrick, Edgewood Arsenal later, he was stationed at. This is the area of the United States, the military that's involved with chemical and biological weapons. Puharich, however, was involved in trying to weaponize paranormal abilities. Puharich's focus in 1952, as early as 1952, is how can we use ESP, telepathy, all these things in a military capacity? Since now we're facing a Cold War with people who use brainwashing methods, Puharich suddenly becomes a hot ticket item. He's talking about using the human brain and the powers of the brain to do all sorts of horrible things to people. He brings together 9 people in a seance. Now, it doesn't make a lot of sense when you realize who these people are. One of them is Arthur Young. Some of you may have heard of Arthur Young. He wrote a lot of very well-received books, The Reflexive Universe, The Geometry of Meaning. Arthur Young was a great guy. He was the inventor of the Bell helicopter. He sold his rights and all of that. He left military engineering, military development at the end of World War II in order to pursue full-time his interest in the paranormal. He studied yoga, Eastern religions, ESP, psychokinesis, astrology, you name it, he was into it, Arthur Young. His wife, Ruth Forbes Payne Young, she was also at the seance. So we have Arthur Young, the inventor of the Bell helicopter, the guy who created the Bell helicopter along with Larry Bell, his partner. We have his wife, the excessively nomenclatured Ruth Forbes Payne Young. That's all her husband. So she's married first to a Forbes. John Kerry, our presidential candidate, was a Forbes. It's a very old, very famous family. She was married to George Lyman Payne. Payne was a direct descendant of one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence and related, coincidentally, to an actor called Robert Treat Payne. Long story. But anyway, Ruth Forbes, also married to a Payne, also married to Arthur Young. Not at the same time, one after the other. She has a son, Michael Payne, who then gets a job at Bell Aerospace through Arthur Young's influence, because Arthur Young helped create the company. Her son needs a job. He gets him a job at Bell Aerospace in Texas. Her best friend is Mary Bancroft. Mary Bancroft was the longtime mistress of Allen Dulles. Allen Dulles, as you know, was a famous head of the CIA, the one that Jack Kennedy fired over the Bay of Pigs when he told Dulles he was going to split the CIA into a million pieces. Allen Dulles was the one who was fired by Kennedy and who later wound up on the Warren Commission investigating Kennedy's death, very conveniently. So these are 2 people, 2 of the 9. So Michael Payne's boss, right? The boss of Michael Payne, Arthur Young's son-in-law, is none other than General Walter Dornberger. And he's shown here. That's Dornberger over here, and that's Himmler over here. And they all got hats. So these are all guys. So Michael Payne has these direct connections right back to paperclip, back to the space program. Michael Payne's wife is also named Ruth. She's Ruth Payne. Ruth Payne is a Quaker. She likes folk dancing, walks on the beach, candlelit dinners, and the Russian language. Allegedly, she's studying Russian. That's Ruth Payne. That's Michael and Ruth in Irving, Texas. That's Ruth Payne again. She's sitting way over on the left. Here is a woman called Marguerite Oswald. Here is Marina Oswald. The picture was taken on November 22nd, 1963, the day that Kennedy was assassinated. That evening, they're photographed in Ruth Payne's living room in Irving, Texas. It was Ruth Payne who got Lee Harvey Oswald the job at the Texas School Book Depository, right on the route where he would be able to assassinate the president. That's Ruth Payne. Ruth Payne had visited Arthur Young and her mother-in-law, Ruth Forbes Payne Young, in Philadelphia in September of 1963. She had Marina Oswald, this Russian defector, the wife of Lee Harvey Oswald, and her children living with her in her house. What was she talking about to Arthur Young, I wonder? Did she ever mention the fact that, hey, I got this Russian defector and his wife living with me in Irving, Texas, Lee Oswald? Maybe you heard of him. He was a Marine. He defected to the Soviet Union, wanting to become a Russian citizen. He redefected back to the United States. He did all of this, and the guy's still only 24 years old. That's pretty good for a 24-year-old. A Marine, somebody involved in the Atsugi Air Base and radar technicians, a guy who spoke Russian fluently enough that his Russian-born wife thought he was Russian. Now, I don't know about you. I studied a lot of languages in my time. I mean, Mandarin, Spanish, French, Italian. I've done a lot of languages. I've studied Russian. Russian is a damn hard language to learn. And yet this young kid with hardly any formal education, just barely got out of high school, joins the Marines and learns to speak fluent Russian like that, so much that he can convince Marina that he's fluent, that he's native Russian. So Marina Oswald, the niece of a KGB, an NKVD, an Army Military Intelligence officer, marries Lee Harvey Oswald, this Marine defector, very famous defector, and they decide to go back to the United States. Ruth Payne wants to learn Russian. That's her story. Oh, I'd love to learn Russian from Marina Oswald. So she gives her some room in her house because they're broke, and then Lee goes to Texas, and, well, the rest is history. So here's the 9. Here's the connection of these 9 people. I didn't mention all the people of the 9. We'll get to that, but they're mostly DuPonts, Astors, Forbes, etc. These are the wealthiest families in the United States at the time, blue blood Americans with long pedigrees going back to the Mayflower or to the Declaration of Independence in some cases. Representatives of these families were at this bizarre seance. And during this seance in Maine, they were contacted, according to all the published documentation. I'm not making this stuff up, and I'm not speculating. Puharich himself published this documentation, saying that aliens, a group of 9, contacted the group of 9 who were at this seance and said, we are 9, you are 9, we're giving you the mission, to help transform life on the planet. And what was their first major contribution was, having to do with the assassination of President Kennedy. So this 9, to me, is very strange. We have to ask ourselves a lot of questions. Did that somehow promote, evolution on this planet, or did that do just the opposite? So there's Arthur Young. There's his daughter-in-law, Ruth Payne, Lee Harvey Oswald to Kennedy. The connections are very tight. And another member of the 9, of course, was an Astor, as I mentioned, Ava Alice Muriel Astor. So all American aristocracy. September 12, 1962, Kennedy makes his famous, we shall go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. The last time an American president talked to Americans this way. We're going to do things not because they're easy, because they're hard, because that's what we're going to do. He told Congress of the moon mission May 25, 1961. In September 62, over a year later, he reiterates this in a very famous speech. You can catch it on YouTube. It's everywhere. Very brilliant, very passionate speech about what we're going to do. And then, of course, in November of the following year, he's assassinated. What does all this have to do with what we're talking about? Okay, in New Orleans, before the assassination, Lee Harvey Oswald gets a job with the William Riley Coffee Company. That coffee company still exists. He went down there to get a job. He worked for a short time. He quits. He tells a coworker, hey, I've just found the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, according to the quotation. He's getting a job at NASA. Well, in 1957, the Russians sent up a Sputnik, and that scared the hell out of the American military establishment. It scared the hell out of the American people. They said, we have all these Nazi scientists, what are we getting for our, what bang for the buck are we getting here? So we have to do something about this. And so they put the fear of God into the Nazi scientists and said, okay, listen, guys, enough is enough. We fooled around enough. Now we have to actually do something. And so the government took control of the space program away from the military and gave it to a civilian organization, NASA. The problem with that was they moved the Nazi scientists from the military to NASA. So it was a change in name only. Suddenly you have military scientists who were Nazis, who were true believers. Now they're working for a civilian agency for NASA under the US government. We didn't really change anything. Direct military control was lost, but the Nazis were still in command. After the assassination, Lee Harvey Oswald leaves the William Riley Coffee Company. He never does work for NASA, although we find out that he was probably working out of an office at the NASA site that was an employment agency for the CIA. This is something that's also come up recently. Anyway, he leaves William Riley. He leaves New Orleans, goes to Texas. After the assassination, his co-workers also all get jobs at NASA. At NASA. They're coffee company clerks, and they got jobs at NASA. As I mentioned, Ruth Paine had visited his wife, visits Arthur Young and his wife. Arthur Young believes, or he's been told, that he's been in contact with these 9 supernatural beings. Andrija Puharich, the guy who organizes this, the captain in the army involved in weaponizing the paranormal, he's the guy who discovers Uri Geller, the Israeli psychic who bends spoons by looking at them. He brings Uri Geller to the United States. He gets him involved with the Sanford Research Institute, run by Scientologists, as it turns out. All this other stuff is going on. Uri Geller eventually says he got tired of it. He thought that he was being run by Puharich as an intelligence asset. He really felt that Puharich was an intelligence agent running him as an agent for one of the intelligence agencies. But part of that program was that he felt from time to time he was being put in contact with extraterrestrial beings. You know, Geller was mystified by what was going on in his brain by all of this. Now, whether you think about Uri Geller as being genuine or not, or a player or not, or whatever, Geller is pretty open and honest about his relationship with Puharich. He didn't like him, he distrusted him, and eventually he cut off relations with him. As I said, Ruth Paine finds Lee the job at the Texas School Book Depository. So then in New Orleans, after the assassination, Garrison remembers David Ferry, Jack Martin, all these guys, Guy Bannister. He conducts his own investigation. And he finds that all of these guys were bishops in a church, except for Guy Bannister, who was like the Pope or something, of the Vatican in New Orleans. And then Guy Bannister and Fred Krisman were the guys who jump-started the UFO thing in 1947 after Kenneth Arnold. So he calls in Fred Krisman. Guy Bannister is dead. He died in 1964, again, mysteriously. So Fred Krisman then is called in. He's interrogated. Nothing much comes of that. So what was the secret space program, from my point of view, from the 1940s? We bring in Nazi scientists to the United States. In 1947, we have the famous Roswell incident. The Roswell debris, we know, is taken to Wright Air Force Base, eventually Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Wright Field at the time, which is the same place where we bring Walter Dornberger, Werner von Braun, and everybody else preliminarily. We bring them all together. All these guys are together in 1947 in one place. At the same time, we have all these UFO sightings. We have Nazi scientists in the space program. We're afraid the Russians have the bomb. As it turns out, a lot of people had the bomb in those days. We have a group of wealthy Americans, all involved in the militarization of the paranormal. And they make this contact with this extraterrestrial group called the Nine. I wrote a book called Sinister Forces. The very first volume is called The Nine. And it focuses on this strange bit of connections. We have this family, this group of families having a seance in 1952 in Maine, talking to aliens in a spaceship hovering over the Earth, they say. And then later we find tendrils leading out from that seance directly to the Kennedy assassination, among other things. But the Kennedy assassination being the most important and the most obvious one. If you follow the Kennedy assassination, you may know of a guy called George de Mohrenschildt. He was a Russian CIA contract agent who eventually helped in some way Lee Harvey Oswald and Marina. He was involved with them. He commits suicide before he has to give an interview about all of this. In his book, his notebook, his address book, when he was after he was found dead, was the phone number of a man who was also involved with the Nine. I mean, Lee Harvey Oswald was surrounded by so many bishops and so many members of the Nine. The poor guy had no chance, you know. I mean, he was basically surrounded by people who all felt they had some sort of mysterious mission. And Lee Harvey Oswald was the guy in the middle. Oswald himself didn't have much of a connection this way. Connection to military intelligence, probably. That fluency in Russian, which should tip you off right away in those days. But the rest of the connections to the Nine, to the assassinations before and since, are incredible. They're astonishing. We know the CIA was blamed for the Kennedy assassination. We've all heard the stories. What we don't really remember is that the CIA at that time not only was involved in protecting Nazi scientists as much as they could, and other Nazis around the world, Nazi war criminals, involved with the Vatican, as I think we've all heard. I'm working on a story right now that I hope I'll be able to publish by the end of the year, involving the monastery route in which the Catholic Church really deliberately helped a lot of very famous, very prominent Nazi war criminals escape, giving them Vatican passports, safe houses. Some of the story you've heard already before. But what we don't really realize is the CIA, at the time of the assassination, for instance, was heavily involved with another Nazi organization, the Gehlen organization, which was running agents for the CIA in Eastern Europe and against the Soviet Union. Again, just like in Paperclip, these Nazi scientists were not really working for us. They were taking our money, they were giving us phony reports, they were virtually useless against the Soviet Union. As it turns out, years later, as we find out, when all the chips are in, when all the information is there, we find out they've been sabotaging us as well. Alan Dulles was protecting Nazi war criminals since before the war ended. We know that in transcripts of speeches and talks that he had with famous Nazi leaders going back to 1944 and 1945. And the fascinating thing about Alan Dulles, bringing all of these pieces of these disparate things together, was that he was Mary Bancroft's mistress. Okay, Mary Bancroft was the friend of Ruth Forbes Payne Young. During the Warren Commission interviews with witnesses, and you can read this in the Warren Commission transcripts, look for Ruth Payne. Read her, she appeared twice before the commission, talking about what she was doing in the days and weeks and months leading up to the assassination, how she knew Lee and Marina Oswald, all of these questions. Alan Dulles is part of that committee. He's sitting in. At the point where Ruth Payne starts to talk about her trip to Philadelphia to meet Arthur Young 2 months before the assassination, 3 months before the assassination, Alan Dulles cuts her off and changes the subject. He does not allow her to finish the story. Read the transcript for yourself, you'll see it. It's blatant. Alan Dulles, who's been quiet the entire time, suddenly jumps in, like a defense attorney, and then suddenly says, oh no, we're not, let's talk about this instead. As she's about to say who she met, who she was dealing with, Alan Dulles changes the subject, changes the story. Her information about Arthur Young never makes it into the record, and she hasn't talked about it since. What was going on? Alan Dulles knew Mary Bancroft. Mary Bancroft was Ruth Forbes Payne Young's best friend. There was a very deep connection there. Alan Dulles knew ahead of time, he had to, about Lee Oswald, Ruth Payne, Marina Oswald, and all of this. And he was desperate to cover up that part and make sure it never made it into the record of the Warren Commission. So we have a lot of wild stuff going on, including the fact that Ruth Payne's husband, Michael Payne, was working for Bell Aerospace. So what do we have? We have a Garrison investigation alleging there was a conspiracy in the Kennedy assassination. The problem with Garrison trying to prove all of this is that he had a cast of characters nobody would believe, right? He had Clay Shaw, who was an unbelievable character on his own, the man that he was trying for the assassination. But he also had all these other characters. He had all these bishops, He didn't know what to do with these bishops. He couldn't understand that the bishops were a front for an intelligence operation. He suspected it, but he didn't know where to go with it. Paranormal researchers, UFO personalities like Guy Bannister, like Fred Krisman, and of course employees of NASA. All of these people can be tied back to Paperclip, can be tied back to the Nazi space program, the people that we brought over. This was all part of the problem. This was all part of what happened. Secrets were kept. There are still classified documents on the Kennedy assassination. We know that thousands of documents have yet to be declassified. Thousands of documents on World War II. Thousands of documents on the Admiral Byrd expedition to Antarctica, right? We've classified so much in the United States alone. Now think of your own countries. I did a lot of work in Latin America. People who know that I was in Chile in 1979 researching the Nazi influence down there and trying to find out information about Nazi technology that had been smuggled to South America. Under military dictatorships in Latin America, of course, there was no information. Secrecy was the order of the day. Documents were classified, shredded, burned. Things went on for 20, 30 years in Latin America, we'll never know. And yet, many of our Nazis wound up there, in Argentina, in Chile, in Bolivia, Uruguay, Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, everywhere. There were Nazis in hiding, all of these places. They were scientists, they were SS officers, they brought technology, they brought money, vast sums of money under Otto Skorzeny. All of this was being brought and developed into programs. Perón used to brag about his his own space program, developing a new jet system, a new, faster than speed of light kind of thing that he was talking about and bragging about, because he knew he had Nazi scientists there working for him. The author Joseph Farrell, very good researcher, has written about the Bell, has written about alternative sources of energy that were being developed by Nazi scientists in South America, in Bariloche, very close to where I was detained in Chile, on the other side of that border. So there's a lot of secrecy yet. We know history, only the declassified portions of history. The world that we know is based upon what we've been told. We can read books about history and feel that we know what's going on. But I can tell you, the history of the last 100 years is largely still classified. We live in a kind of dream world, thinking that we know what actually happened. Right now, there's information that the Japanese had detonated an atomic device in August of 1945 off the coast of Korea. And there are Japanese intelligence officers who come forward with this story and who are insisting that it took place. If that's true, we have to rewrite the end of World War II, right? Then we have to go back and say, wait a minute, what really happened? If we talk about paperclip, the way I was taught in school in the 1950s and 60s was that the Nazis were good, these were good Germans. Werner von Braun was never a Nazi. Dornberger was never a Nazi. All these guys were on our side. As it turns out, it wasn't true. As it turns out, they were sabotaging us every step of the way. Our space program was the result of Nazis trying to stonewall us and to prevent us from getting there, until eventually, after Sputnik, they were told, you better do it or get out. So that's what happened. We sold our soul in the United States, and not just the United States, believe me, other countries as well, including the Soviet Union. We sold our soul for this technology. We dealt with some of the worst war criminals in history. Not just even the Holocaust, but the idea that they had slave labor that they worked to death and replaced with other slave laborers. And these people who employed these slave laborers deliberately, who were involved in every step of that process, including the killing of these laborers also, were the people that we brought over for the space program. Our space program has its origins in people, on the one hand, like Jack Parsons, who once wrote that he was the Antichrist. He was a brilliant man, but he believed he was the Antichrist and was ushering in a new age of witchcraft, according to him. And he was a follower of Crowley and member of the Ordo Templi Orientis and all of this, a very brilliant guy, but a very strange guy on the one hand, and we had the Nazis on the other. You know, these were the people that were jump-starting the space program of the United States, starting in 1936 and going up until the moon launch. So we have to go back and relook at this history and ask ourselves why. Why was it so necessary? Why was the space program militarily necessary? Why did they work for the army? Why did they sabotage the process as much as they could? Why did the army allow Nazi scientists to wander off the base and do whatever they wanted to do, communicate with whomever they wanted to? Fort Bliss, Texas is on the border of Texas and Mexico. That region in the 1940s was like Vienna during the Cold War. It was a place where spies hung out with spies. It was rife with all sorts of intelligence activity. All sorts of things were going on in that border area, all the way from the California-Mexico border all the way through Texas, all the way to Brownsville. There was a lot of cross-border traffic. A lot of very strange individuals crossed that border. A lot of military people, a lot of intelligence people. The Nazis were still running spies after the end of the war because they were protecting Nazi assets. They were protecting SS officers who were making their way into the United States from Latin America, and people making their way from the States into places like Argentina, being paid for by Nazi gold. So we have to reevaluate the history of the world since 1945. We have to go back and look at it again. If we want to know what happened, what's going on with the space program, and about breakaway civilizations, about motivations to create a space program for the rich and the powerful, we have to go back to this period of time. We have to understand why it was that we could deal with the Nazis so easily, why it was we thought that was the best thing that we could do, why we gave them carte blanche, allow them to do whatever they wanted to do, why we bent over backwards for these guys. Murderers. Some of them wound up in positions of tremendous influence in South America. Klaus Barbie became head of the secret police in Bolivia, an official government position. At the same time, he's running drugs, guns, and assassinating communist leaders, socialist leaders, or anybody you particularly didn't like, not only in South America, but in Europe. There were assassinations taking place in Spain and France and Germany on the orders of people like Barbie and Operation Condor in South America. This is all part of our history. These are not footnotes. You know, we're being told they're footnotes. We're being told it's not central to what actually happened. I tell you, though, that's not true. As anyone who knows, who's traveled in those countries knows, the stranglehold that the Nazis and the Germans in general, but the Nazis specifically had on the economies of those countries, on the culture of many of those areas, was incredible. You know, and in some cases still is. So, who benefited, right? Civilian control of NASA began in '57. The Nazi scientists remained in place. They were there at the very beginning of the UFO era. Many people believe the Nazis had developed the very first prototypes of the flying saucer, of wingless aircraft, of alternate energy, of the atomic bomb. The Luftwaffe had a map of Manhattan in which they were trying to estimate the damage an atomic bomb would have and how many people would be killed. This map was developed in 1943. You know, we know the evidence is there. We just have to keep looking. Something else was going on. What they told us was not the way it happened. And now my fear is in the United States, because we have the Patriot Act and because we have all sorts of ways to stifle inquiry, to stop information from getting out, more secrets can be kept, more programs can be instituted about which we will know nothing until it's too late. Kennedy was perceived as a threat to the program. He had signed treaties with the Soviets, promised not to invade Cuba. This was against the Nazi ideology. This was contrary to a Nazi platform, not an American platform. Kennedy was a very popular president, you know. But his idea of cutting a deal with the Soviets and essentially saving the world from thermonuclear war in 1962 was disregarded because many in the military thought we should have gone to war. The Nazi right-wing coalition was very strong. In the United States, it still is. If you look at who finances and who helps a certain political party in the United States, you're going to find that there's tremendous support from Nazi and neo-Nazi organizations for that political party. One party in particular, not the other. So you're going to ask yourself, well, what is all this about? President Reagan, of course, was heavily supported by something called the World Anti-Communist League. The World Anti-Communist League was populated almost entirely by Nazis, former Nazi officers, former people who had worked against the Soviets, working for fascist and Nazi dictatorships. I mean, it was incredible stuff because they were true believers. George Patton famously said, we were pointing our guns in the wrong direction. When we went after the Nazis, we should have gone after the Soviets. There's a lot that we could talk about, and I don't have the time, I don't think. How am I going for time? I'll just keep talking until you tell me to stop. Okay. Really? Oh, cool. Okay. In that case, the pause that refreshes. Here's the question I want to ask. What more was there at stake? Why was Kennedy killed? It had to be for some really big reason. It couldn't be because they didn't like his hair, you know. It had to be for something really specific and something big, something major, something that was going to affect the economy and the political structure, power structures that existed. Did Kennedy's insistence on going to the moon rob other projects of finances and resources that they needed? Was the moon a kind of chimera, a kind of quixotic dream that we should go to the moon first and show our superiority over the Soviets? Was it something that took money and power away from this inner circle of right-wing zealots, of Nazis who had a different approach to science, a different approach to the space program? People who wanted to do their own thing, and that Kennedy's insistence that we were going to put all of our money into the space program took away power from them, gave more power to NASA, but took it away from the military and took it away from other projects. So was there, in the 1960s, a secret space program? We talk a lot about the military-industrial complex. President Eisenhower warned us about that in his farewell address when he left office. And we've focused on that to a great deal, but we don't really know what it is. We know it has to do with guns and the Army. But remember that the military also was developing rockets, jet propulsion, various types of missiles. NASA was solely occupied with visiting other planets, according to its brief. Its space science was satellites going to other planets. It was a non-military application of space technology. The military was still involved in their own aspects of space technology. And this involved missiles. It involved alternate sources of energy. It involved different types of aircraft that could fly at tremendous speeds. About 18 months ago, as an example, I was invited to participate as an observer in a meeting of former intelligence officers out in Las Vegas. Go figure. And during the course of that time that I spent there, we visited several military installations, and we had to have all sorts of security checks done and all of that. And you've all heard of Area 51. Well, there was a presentation given, much like I'm giving one now, on Area 51 by one of the guys who was there, who spent his lifetime there. And he was very bitter about the fact that even the CIA could have an association where former spooks could sit down and chat and have drinks and talk about their failures or successes. But that the guys at Area 51 could not. They're still bound by secrecy laws of things that happened back in the 1950s and 1960s. You might remember the U-2 incidents. You know, the Nazis had the V-2, we had the U-2. And the U-2 was our stealth plane that took photographs of the Soviet Union, of other countries. It was a spy plane. That, of course, was developed at Area 51. That was where it was housed. That's where it was based. So all of this took place at Area 51. And Area 51, according to popular understanding, was a military installation, a military base. That's not exactly true. It was an intelligence operation. It had nothing really to do directly with the military. It was an indirect relationship that was had at Area 51. So you had the development of the U-2. People, of course, always say they were back engineering, reverse engineering spacecraft or UFOs, that sort of thing there. This guy would not talk about that. Of course, he poo-pooed the idea. But his presentation began with a picture of an alien and the theme song from the X-Files, right? So he starts his presentation this way, and of course everybody laughs politely or nervously. And then he goes on to give his talk about Area 51, and thank you. He says I have until 3 o'clock. No, sorry. Don't worry. Oh, I've got a lot more presentations in here. Believe me, we could do this all night. Okay. Sure. So he went into a lot of detail about what happened up there and how we lost more of our CIA agents in a single accident involving Area 51 than we ever lost in the field. So there was a lot going on up there, and that's still classified. He still can't really talk about it, not even to a group of former intelligence officers who had all signed secrecy oaths and everything else, and he still couldn't go into it. You know, so his presentation was rather thin. But he did talk about the U-2 programs and Francis Gary Powers and all of that, and everybody in the audience understood that when he's talking about Francis Gary Powers, the pilot of the U-2 who was shot down over the Soviet Union, we're also talking about Lee Harvey Oswald. We're also talking about Oswald's involvement with that particular part of the space program. Because Oswald was stationed, as we know, at Atsugi Air Force Base in Japan, which was one of only 2 bases in the world at which the U-2 would take off from. That was the base where it was kept. So the flights from Japan went over the Soviet Union. And Oswald's job as a radar operator was in the room with the traffic controllers that were sending up the U-2s. So every time we turn around in these major political events, we run across the space program again in some way, shape, or form. It was insidious. It involved all sorts of aspects of American life, things that we would never expect. Why did people who worked at Riley Coffee Company all go to work for NASA? Why did Oswald claim that he was getting a job at NASA? Why did all these other spooks and all these other strange people wind up somehow with the space program and then again with the Kennedy assassination? There is something very serious going on here. There's a very strange part of American history and by extension, in a way, of American and world history that's taking place with the space program. If you look at the space programs in Europe, if you look at the space programs in China and other parts of the world, you will see all the connections going back to this one central phenomenon of the space race between the Soviet Union and the United States. And you have to ask yourself, was it really a space race? You know, politicians on both sides may have thought it was a race. Low-level politicians may have thought this. They may have been stricken with fear that we were in a race against the Russians for domination of space. We may have thought this. But the scientists on either side, I think, never had any illusions about this. There was no race. There was a cooperation. You know, someone at some point decided the Soviets can go first. They'll have their Sputnik, and they'll send a dog into space, and then eventually they will send an astronaut into space. The Russians had the first go at it. How could they possibly? When we had the creme de la creme, when we had all of the best and the brightest of the Nazi space program. How did that happen? It had to have been a cooperation between the scientists themselves. This implicates or implies that there was another level of government in the world at that time. That there was another basis of cooperation, of collaboration between people that we thought were dire enemies. That there were networks of people operating throughout the world who cooperate with each other in some way, shape, or form. And this is what we have in the space program. They cooperated so much that people died, people were killed, people were assassinated. Serious investigations into the UFOs led to the deaths of a lot of people. James McDonald, famous scientist who went before Congress and insisted that the UFO sightings were not the result of sightings of the planet Venus, swamp gas, or weather balloons. For this, he was ridiculed. He was later found dead. They said he committed suicide. They always say they committed suicide. That's the standard response. Murray Jessup, right, involved in the Philadelphia experiment stuff and a researcher into UFOs and all of that, commits suicide, they say, in Miami, Florida. You know, all of these people who are seriously involved in the study, who try to promote it, who try to talk reasonably about it, not wild-eyed, aluminum foil hat wearing people, you know, talking that their minds are being controlled from Venus or something. These are serious people. James McDonald was a very serious guy. He was a scientist. He was a doctor, a PhD, a meteorologist. He knew what he was talking about. Dead. Jessup, a very reasonable guy, a very sort of scientific-minded guy, not the kind of wild-eyed guy who would believe anything that anybody ever told him. In the last month or two of his life was extremely paranoid, extremely nervous. He felt that there was something going on, that somebody was after him, and then he wound up dead in Miami. So we have these things connected with the UFO program. Why? If the UFO phenomenon is a figment of our imaginations, if we're projecting stuff onto atmospheric conditions and we're seeing ghosts or something like that, why all of this secrecy? Why all the murder? Why all the suicides? What does that have to do with just believing in 6 impossible things before breakfast? There's something very serious, something that points to people who are willing to spill blood in the furtherance of a goal or an objective. And the best example we have of that in the last 100 years has been, of course, the Nazis and the SS. People who thought that to kill huge numbers of people was justified for a kind of spiritual reason. The Nazis believed very seriously. This was not propaganda. They believed very seriously in the idea that in the blood is the spirit. They believed that your race carried a spiritual component and that those of inferior races, quote unquote, were inferior spiritually, so it was okay to kill them. It was, in fact, it was necessary to kill them, to purify the rest of the planet, to purify the race. This was something they believed very sincerely. And they looked to American scientists who came up with this idea in something called eugenics and the race science program. So, when you have people who believe that the ends justify the means, when you have people who believe that murder is acceptable, even on a huge scale, because of the responsibility they have to jumpstart evolution, the next stage of it, and then they lose a war, do you really think they're going to go away? Do you really think they're going to say, shucks, lost the war, I guess we're all going to become Democrats? You know, it's not going to happen. It just won't happen. Many times I've told people the same example of Christianity. Christianity began and lived underground, in cemeteries, in catacombs, meeting secretly at night for over 300 years before it was accepted in the Roman Empire. 300 years. These people who believed in a kind of an impossible thing, a resurrected person, right? They kept on to that belief for 300 years. The Nazis lost their war in 1945, right? 65, 66 years ago. That's not a long time. You know, some of them are still alive. Some of these people are still alive and they're still having influence in their own countries. They're having influence as far away as Australia. They're all over the place. You know, and as they die off, they have people who are following in their footsteps, people they've talked to, indoctrinated. They don't go away. This is a cult that does not disappear. The problem with this particular cult is that they're very well funded, and they have a lot of supporters in a lot of countries. I should say, including this country, but a lot of other countries. No one is immune. They're everywhere. Okay, and I'm not saying this out of paranoia. I'm the kind of person who generally does not behave that way or think that way, but the facts, the documents speak for themselves. The presence of Nazis and neo-Nazis in this world in general is growing. It's not going away. I travel a lot. The last 20 years especially, I've traveled to more than maybe 40, 50 countries. And I find constantly in airports in developing nations, particularly, copies of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, this famous hoax that was invented by the the Tsarist secret police back before the Russian Revolution. I mean, they're being reprinted in local languages everywhere. Henry Ford, the American inventor who invented the assembly line for making automobiles, was a notorious anti-Semite. He was part of the origins of our military-industrial complex. His assembly line technology was used to make planes and jets and bombs and tanks and everything else. Here was a guy who was as anti-Semitic as Hitler, to whom Hitler gave the highest award that Nazi Germany could give to a non-German, in the same year that he gave it to Benito Mussolini. Henry Ford's writings are being reprinted around the world. His anti-Semitic diatribes that go on for pages and pages and pages are being reprinted and available everywhere. I've found it in airports in Latin America and on book stalls and newspaper stands in Malaysia and Indonesia and in Singapore. I mean, everywhere. Being offered as though it was true. Being offered without criticism, without critique. There's a beginning of a wave of this kind of anti-Semitic, pro-Nazi, pro-fascist sentiment that's taking place. And it's taking place everywhere. It's taking place in the United States as well as anywhere else. Because people are afraid. It's the fear that we've inherited. I talked briefly about Charles Manson. I made a passing reference to him. Charles Manson was brilliant in a sense. He said, "Get the fear." That was his famous slogan. Get the fear. Become afraid. Marry the fear. Become wedded to it. This way it cannot control you. Understand the fear. You know, feel it in your bones, and then you can get past it. The idea was to fear completely and then not to fear anything anymore. Manson famously feared nothing. I mean, at the same time, he was a great manipulator. Fear is used to control. It's used to control us in the 1950s as I was growing up in the Cold War. We believed at any moment we were going to be bombed by the Russians or the Chinese. I don't know how the Chinese were going to do it, but we were told the Chinese were going to do it. The Russians, of course, were going to bomb us at any moment. We were living with this every day. We heard the air raid sirens every week. They kept testing the air raid sirens, so we would always hear an air raid siren. At that time, I lived in Chicago. and the sirens would go off. They kept testing them every week. At any moment, we would hear these things on the wrong day, and we knew the day had come. We would be bombed. This fear made it possible for the military-industrial complex to grow. And then, things kind of quieted down. The Soviet Union fell. The Cold War was, quote unquote, over. Nothing else to fear anymore. Of course, that would mean tremendous loss of revenue for the companies that had been based on fear. So we needed something else, right? We needed another enemy. So Saddam Hussein came along. He was very, very convenient for us. So Saddam Hussein was a new enemy, a new scapegoat. New people to hate, new people to fight against, new people to raise an army against. So everybody was happy again back in the state of Connecticut, which is virtually run by the defense establishment. Everybody got their jobs back. And then, of course, famously, we had 9/11. Now, a lot of people will ask, do you believe that 9/11 was created by a conspiracy? I always tell people it doesn't matter. Look at what happened. Look at how 9/11 was used. That's what's important, really important. Because 9/11 was used the way, to go back to the 1930s, the way Hitler used the Reichstag fire. There was a fire. Definitely there was a fire. It took place at the German parliament. No doubt about it. What was in doubt was who started the fire. Hitler said they were communists. He said, there's a communist conspiracy in this country. It's going to destroy us. You have to give me all of the authority. You have to surrender your liberties, and I'll keep you safe. We know what happened. In 9/11, same thing happened. We were told, oh, we have Islamic terrorists. They're everywhere. They're going to kill us. In order to be safe, you have to give me, the President of the United States, total power. We have to be able to spy on you. We're going to suspend habeas corpus. We're going to do all these things because we need to keep you safe. Well, what's the point then? What's the point of surrendering who you are and your identity for safety? You can only do that if you feel really, really afraid. It only works if there's fear. If there's no fear, in your right mind, you would never make that trade-off. Never. It would never occur to you to do that. It's only fear that makes it possible. So, as Manson said, get the fear. Fear is this great motivator of people, and fear is used to keep us from looking at what may have really happened, what may have really transpired. So, when we talk about a secret space program, as I've said before, why wouldn't there be a secret space program? Why wouldn't there be? We have a lot of people here. We're afraid of certain things, and the people with power are afraid of something else. The people with power are afraid this planet may become uninhabitable soon. They're afraid there may be wars over water. There may be wars over clean air. Whether or not you believe in global warming, whether or not you believe it was created by humans or not, not the issue. The people in charge, they won't tell you this, but they do believe in global warming. They do believe that the planet is gradually becoming less and less inhabitable. So there would be a secret space program. There would be a program to get as many of their people off planet as possible. Why not? Why wouldn't there be? That's a pretty good investment, I think, of time, resources, money, technology, whatever. We know that individual entrepreneurs are developing their own space shuttles, charging a few $1 million for a seat. That should tell you something, what it's going to cost us to get off this planet if we had to for any particular reason. So are there people willing to say, we're building our own rocket ships, like in a Ray Bradbury story, we're going to have our own rocket ships, we're going to leave, and all you guys are going to have to stay behind and deal with whatever it is whatever mess we've created. So yes, these secrets will exist. They have to. I mean, the people in charge are not stupid. We may think they're stupid. We laugh at our politicians in every country, but they're not all that stupid. Some of them are, some of them are reptiles, to use a David Icke expression. I'm speaking metaphorically, he's not, but I think we agree. There's common ground there. So you have to ask yourself, what is your position on this? Where do you fit in? Where do we as individuals fit in? If the government can keep secrets, as they did with the space program, as they did with Paperclip, as they did with the assassinations, as they did with Admiral Byrd's diaries, for crying out loud. If the government keeps those secrets, why can't we have our own secrets? Why, as individuals, we're not allowed to have a Patriot Act for ourselves? Why can't we tell our governments no, you can't have this information about me. It's classified. A friend of mine, a guy called Norman Mailer, years ago during Watergate, came up with the idea that the people should have their own CIA. This was his concept. He said there should be a people's CIA, to go up to work against the other CIA. We should be collecting our own information. Well, things like WikiLeaks have made this possible, right? The internet has made this possible. We have the information available to us. We can start digging. People do come out of the woodwork. They do start spilling their guts, There are people who are close to what's going on, who have a little piece of information, and they're willing to share it. And these people, when you put these pieces together, you can start to see what's really going on. That's a good thing. But also we have to have a way to protect our own information. This is the thing that governments will never agree to. They will say, wait a minute, we're keeping secrets. We have our classification systems. We have documents. We have things that you're not supposed to know because you can't handle the truth, as Jack Nicholson said. You can't handle it. But yet they give to themselves the right to know everything they possibly can about you. How does that happen? How does that work? So I think Norman Mailer was right. What you need is a way to collect information to defend yourselves against the collection of information against you. And there has to be a way to do this. And in the secret space programs that we're talking about, we'll continue to talk about today, you're going to hear about a lot of secrecy. You're going to hear about a lot of suggestions for new types of technology that have been going on. We know that technologies exist, for instance, that would give us free energy or close to free energy. And they've been in existence for a long time. We can't get access to that, because of government policies, because of secrecy, because of classified documents, because of the opposition by corporations. So our lives are on the line, because of these policies that are taken, these positions that are taken. And they're not taken by you and me. They're not taken by people in general. It's not all of us getting together and saying, why, no, we shouldn't have free energy. That's horrible. None of us would agree to that. And yet we have to accept it. And this is what's wrong. This is the kind of mentality that helped to support the space program back in the 1940s and 50s when we brought Nazi scientists over. We were not allowed to object. People did. People did. Jewish organizations wrote letters complaining to Truman, wrote letters complaining to the Pentagon about bringing Nazi scientists to the United States. Truman was on their side. Truman forbade the Pentagon from bringing Nazis to the United States. He said, no, we will not do this. This barters our soul. You can't possibly cut deals with these murderers. The Pentagon ignored him. That's how much power the president has, right? The Pentagon ignored him. They totally ignored him. And internally, the memos that have surfaced in the last few years show that they thought, well, the Jews are overreacting. They saw those films about the Holocaust. We can't trust their judgment right now. Excuse me? How could anyone who had seen the film clips in the late 1940s as they came out of Germany and were being showed at every movie theater in the United States, and all the soldiers coming back talking about liberating the camps, how could anybody have said the Jews were overreacting? They're just being emotional. I know. Must be that time of the month for the Jews. But that's what the reaction was. And it's chilling to read this in the documents that have been declassified. Go online and find them. They're there. You can read this for yourself. It is astonishing. Read a book by Linda Hunt called Secret Agenda. Great book. Okay? She goes into a lot of detail. She reproduces these documents. It was very difficult to get a copy of this book in the United States after it was published. When I was researching Sinister Forces, and I was looking for a copy of Secret Agenda by Linda Hunt, I had to get a copy in French because there were no copies at all in the United States at that time. You could not get a used copy. You could not get a new copy. There was nothing. Luckily, I can read French. Otherwise, what's the point? But I did manage to get the book in French. Now you can get it, you can download it, but you can't get it in print. And here's a book that blew the lid off what was taking place with the paperclip program and how we had been lied to by so many people regarding the Nazi background of people like Werner von Braun and Dornberger, Struckold, and everyone else. All the Nazis. We're talking thousands that were brought over. Not a few hundred, as normally the history books will tell you. Many more than that. And the paperclip program went all the way through the 1960s, boys and girls. It wasn't just the 1940s or even the 1950s. It went all the way up to 1960 and beyond. We were bringing scientists over that late, wherever we could find them, giving them jobs, setting them up. They became wealthy in many cases. Von Braun did, Dornberger did, as they were plotting to kill political leaders and doing all sorts of other things. We gave them a lot of work and a lot of money. You know. This is the information that we need in order to make decisions about who we're supporting, what programs we support, what policies we support. We don't know enough to make these decisions yet because we've been lied to for so long. But if we go on the supposition that everything is lies and we'll never know the truth, we will freeze. Our gears will freeze and we'll stop. You know, we won't go any further. We will say to ourselves, well, we'll never know anything. It's all a secret. It's a mystery. We'll have to give up. Don't do that. You know, don't do that. Don't deny what people like the WikiLeaks founder was doing, or the people who are blowing the whistle to WikiLeaks, actually. Are all these people going on the line and saying, here's what's really going on. Here are the memos. Here's the real history of the world being told in these memos. Don't deny their sacrifice. They are trying to get this word out. They're trying to make every one of us aware of what's really going on. It makes for very sad reading, of course. Some of it is chilling. Some of it is just depressing. But we need to know. We need to know what's really going on.